This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to a Tuesday edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Andrew Paterson, Michael Remis with you. Hope you had an awesome May-long weekend. We've got a lot to talk about coming out of a weekend that included a lot of off-season turmoil with the Toronto Maple Leafs, some crazy games in the NHL playoffs and NBA for that matter, an amazing PGA championship, and so much more to get to. We, of course, Bomber training camp continuing. I'm really looking forward to catching up with our pal Joe Pascucci in the first segment coming up in 20-25 minutes. Scooch is actually working out at the Hockey Hall of Fame, and this is anyone that knows Joe or follows his Twitter feed from all the great video archives he has from his incredible career as the sports director at Global and CKND here in Winnipeg will know that it almost was meant to be that Joe would be working in doing archival stuff at the Hockey Hall of Fame. So wanted to talk to him about our old pal Paul Maurice being one game away from going to the Stanley Cup Final and his thoughts on the upcoming Bomber season. I'm also very interested to hear about what he's got cooking over at the Hockey Hall of Fame. So we'll do that, and then it'll be hammer time. Jeff Hamilton from the Winnipeg Free Press. We will hit the latest topics around Winnipeg with the Jets offseason, of course, the Bombers' upcoming preseason action in the season just around the corner. So we're locked and loaded. We will talk a little Assiniboia Downs. Opening night was last night. Big night for Remis in our head-to-head challenge. And got a chance to take in the Goldeyes on the weekend as well. We'll let you know some of the observations from the ballpark from yours truly. And of course, Fish are back for the next 3 days as well. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, opening up a new series tonight. So we'll get to all of that. Sea Bears begin this week, and unfortunately, end of the season for the Winnipeg Ice. So the docket is full today. Great to have you with us. If you're new finding us on YouTube, make sure to hit that red subscribe button. We're here every day, Monday to Friday, barring holidays like yesterday, 1 o'clock Central Time live. And you can also get the audio version of Winnipeg Sports Talk in your feed by simply subscribing wherever you get your favorite podcast. Search Winnipeg Sports Talk, and that'll usually be in your inbox just around 3:30 in time for the drive home if you work 8 to 4 or 9 to 5. All right, just before we get in to it with Michael Remis, got to thank the sponsors that make the show happen every day. Princess Auto, Coolbet Canada, Breezy Bend, Aikens Lake, Little Brown Jug, BP, Royal Sports, Consolidated Supply, Nick and Nicky DQ Group. DQs are busy this weekend. F Apparel, Wallace & Wallace, Vita Health Fresh Market, Canadian Club, Manitoba Battery, Aquatech, Modern Man, the Winnipeg Goldeyes, and of course our friends at Assiniboia Downs that kicked it off last night. We'll go back to the post for night 2 of live racing this evening. Let's get it on. Welcome to everyone that's with us live on YouTube and chat, and welcome in Michael Remis to the show. Remo, what is up? How was your weekend?
It's great. I know, look, officially, it says summer starts June 21, but I think it's here, May long. Summer kickoff, right? Fire with the barbecue, clean the deck, get all set, man. It was an awesome weekend.
Dinosaurs? Was it
I went to
dinosaurs involved?
Yeah, I went to the zoo. Yeah, dinosaurs are out, so that's how you know they're back. That's how you know it's summer. You're right. Nailed it.
I got to give a big shout out to the gang out of Grand Pines. Made it up the highway out to the lake for a little bit and got a chance to jump on the golf course. Great hospitality from our friends down at Grand Pines. If you're ever out in the Victoria Beach, Grand Beach area, definitely check it out. Had a great round. And yeah, the weather was great. Little smoky at times, but all things considered, that we've had May-long weekends that have had snow on the ground. So I think we will certainly take it. There's a lot of things to get to right off the bat, but it seems like it's been a week since we've been on the air, Reem. And I think back to Friday's show, and Friday morning was sort of dominated by the big news out of Toronto of Kyle Dubas leaving. And then Brendan Shanahan spoke after we were on the air. We'll get into this a little bit more later on, but were you like me? And I know people sometimes get triggered when we talk about the Leafs, but this story is so wild. I couldn't get enough information on what is happening to Toronto. And for everyone that thought the Jets would be the Canadian team that would have the most offseason interest with the potential movement of some star players, the Jets have company now because there is a lot of questions to be answered in Toronto about the future of the team. Austin Matthews' future now after Brendan Shanahan told Kyle Dubas to take a hike, proverbially speaking, on Friday.
I'm so, I know there was, off-season drama here with the Jets and Pierre-Luc Dubois, and, last year we had the coaching search, Trotz Watch. The Leafs this year, man, I'm so all over this. Following, I was listening to the Athletic podcast with James Myrtle, Elliot Friedman doing a great job detailing what's going on over there in 32 Thoughts. Fascinating that you could go from one day, we're going to bring this guy back, and they're working on a contract extension. Then because of a press conference, you change your mind on a franchise-altering decision like that. When there are big decisions for them to be made this summer, as you mentioned, Nylander and Matthews eligible for extensions, and also just the years of playoff failure for this team. But I think the Leafs, they're a great regular season team, have to figure out how to get it done in the playoffs, and I still think Kyle Dubas is a very good GM. Looking forward to seeing where he ends up. But it just, the way that it went down is so fascinating. And Brendan Shanahan coming out on Friday while we were doing the show, detailing the whole process was incredible. And then Kyle Dubas coming out with a letter on his Twitter account today. So it's never ending there for the center of the universe. I know people who listen to this show going to be probably, as you said, what is it? We're going to get the in chat. What is this Leafs lunch? Talk about, how do you not talk about this? It's amazing.
Yeah, and we'll have some time for it more a little later on, I'm sure. Well, it would be interesting to hear from Joe, who is out there right now, just what the Leaf Nation's feeling like right now. I'll say this, the frankness and openness of Shanahan with the details that he provided as to how it all went down is just something that we're certainly not used to getting from many teams. And I mean, there'll be natural comparisons for the Leafs to hear what's happening in Winnipeg with Kevin Cheveldayoff continuing to be the guy going forward. And obviously a little bit of a different line of reporting without a board and without two competing media conglomerates as the owners, along with Larry Tannenbaum. But when you think about the details or lack thereof we got at the end of the season from Jets management about the plan going forward, what is happening, it was stunning, frankly, just how open Shanahan was. And now this is kind of sort of all playing out in the public. And you mentioned about Matthews being eligible for an extension. I mean, the thing that is so critical right now is that on July 1st, he gets a full and no move clause. So if they don't think they're going to be able to sign him and have to trade him, that has to happen before July 1st. So this has added a whole nother couple layers to the NHL offseason. But we will get to that in a little bit more on free agency, who might be out there later on for the Winnipeg Jets. Just speaking of hockey quickly, and we'll get to the NHL playoffs. Unfortunately, we didn't have any hockey at the rink this weekend. The Ice, after winning game number 1, ended up losing at home in game number 2 and then dropping all 3, finally succumbing to Brad Lambert and the Seattle Thunderbirds in a 5th game. And they fall one step short of their goal to be WHL champions, but a hell of a season and a hell of a run for a number of players that probably won't be back in Ice uniforms next year. And this was sort of the window for that team to make it happen, Remo. And listen, as great as they were all regular season, they ran into an absolute buzzsaw of that Seattle team. And ironically, the Winnipeg Jets sending Brad Lambert to Seattle might have been a big reason why the Winnipeg Ice aren't playing in the Memorial Cup this weekend.
It's funny. I did notice that the Winnipeg Jets tweeted out, "Oh, big congratulations to Brad Lambert on winning the WHL championship and making it to the Memorial Cup." And the replies were people, pointing out, "Hey, you play in the same city as the team that he beat." But yeah, shout out to Brad Lambert. We did want to see some development from him this year. Started off, in Europe, then played the juniors, and then played in the dub, and really took off down the stretch. He was a huge factor for them, and the talent on the Seattle team, pretty incredible with Dylan Guenther as well. And they really loaded up. Both teams loaded up for this matchup, and Seattle, winning 3 in a row at home, plus game 2, taking the win. So they're off to the Memorial Cup, and great season for the Ice. Last year I think they wanted to get to this point, and they fell short. And this year they got to the championship game, and you didn't win. Unfortunate, but I think you have to give them a hats off for a successful season and a successful run. And you wonder what happens to them next season with the roster turnover that you said is going to happen.
Yeah, well, one thing I do know is that Zach Benson's going to hear his name called earlier in the first round at the NHL draft in Nashville coming up at the end of next month. And then, a number of players, Geekie, McLennan, Savoy, in all likelihood moving on. So, unfortunately, this was the year for the Winnipeg Ice. And listen, they had a phenomenal season. They did fall just short in not winning the Western Hockey League championships. And I guess now that the season is over, certainly the conversations around that club in Winnipeg will be, what is the future of the Ice? Will they be here? Will they continue to play at the University of Manitoba? How does that look going forward? And, speaking of tight-lipped organizations, we have not heard boo from Matt Cockle, the GM, or really anybody from the organization outside of the actual hockey product on the ice for a long, long time right now. And I would imagine at some point this summer, there'll be some clarity as to what is happening, with this team. I guess I'm expecting them to be here next year. Certainly moving a club to an entirely new market. There's so much that goes into that. If that, and I'm not suggesting that it will, but I would imagine it has to be a possibility considering the arena situation. I guess if that's happening, it would have to happen soon. I have no reason to believe that is happening this year, but I do think there needs to be some clarity as to the future of the Winnipeg Ice, where they'll be playing, all of the issues around the club that really haven't been answered through the pandemic up until this point. It was all about the hockey, but now it's about business, and we'll see what happens with the Winnipeg Ice. Speaking of hockey right now, Reen, Paul Maurice, 1 game away from going back to the Stanley Cup Final, a 1-0 shutout last night, thanks to Sergei Bobrovsky. And the Panthers, having scored only 6 goals in the series, are now 60 minutes, maybe more, away from going to the Cup Final. What an incredible run for the 8th seed and the lowest seeded team by points in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. And I know there's going to be a lot of reaction here from Jets fans seeing Paul Maurice 1 year after walking away from Winnipeg, joining the Florida Panthers, and really coaching the hell out of that 8th seed. He was the one he put in Bobrovsky, told him to be great, and he's been pretty awesome with his first playoff shutout yesterday. Both series so far, so incredibly tight. The first 2 games of each conference final going to overtime, and yesterday's game 3, a 1-0 win. I think it shows you how close these teams are, but the Panthers, they got Matthew Tkachuk, who had the 2 overtime winners, and too good to celebrate with his teammates. Thought it, made it about himself by walking right off the ice. But
Jeff Malott did it better. We all know that.
Yeah, but hey, they're up 3-0, 1 game away. I don't think anyone predicted that, and I'm looking forward to the new Paul Maurice gif being him lifting the cup instead of the waving on the bench. It's going to be him lifting the cup. So get ready for that one to be explode. I think social media would break if Paul Maurice lifted the cup. And congrats to him and Jamie Compon on a great playoff so far. And we'll see what happens in Game 4 tomorrow.
I would love. Here's a why not question of the day for you for Not Autocorp, and hit us up in the comments. I'd love to know how people are feeling. Like, does this run of the Panthers in the playoffs changed the way you feel about Paul Maurice's time in Winnipeg, or the end of the Maurice era, or when it happened? It's been fascinating having conversations about the Panthers and about Maurice with Jet fans over the last couple weeks, as the Panthers have sort of become more and more real as far as a legit Stanley Cup contender. Some will say, and the funny thing is, there's a lot of revisionist history. A lot of the people that are saying fire Maurice, fire Maurice, fire Maurice for a long time, now we're saying, well, it obviously wasn't Maurice. It was the general manager. It was the players. And I mean, listen, that's part of the fun aspect of sports talk. Takes can change very quickly, Reem. But listen, Maurice is authoring, his team is authoring right now an absolutely incredible story. When you think about where this team was mid-season, Panther Nation was basically saying this is the worst hiring ever. They've completely screwed things up. People wanted him fired in Florida this year, in this first year of the contract. And they also thought that they probably couldn't do anything with Bobrovsky's dead contract at $10 million. And now Bob is leading this team to, within one win right now of the Stanley Cup Final.
It's absolutely incredible. These Carolina players are throwing their hands up. We can't beat this guy. Well, how are you supposed to score goals here? They're really out-shooting, out-chancing, and Sergei Bobrovsky, he stood on his head. You can talk about what coaching, and I joked in our Discord, I'm like, you've heard the saying, like, show me a good coach, I'll show you a good goalie, and Paul Maurice is making them, or sorry, not Paul Maurice, Sergei Bobrovsky is making them look great. He's covering up a lot of, errors, and he's been absolutely fantastic all playoffs. So I would think he's the leader for Conn Smythe if Florida were to win the Stanley Cup. And the idea of a Florida-Vegas Stanley Cup just seems so strange.
I think it's got to be Tkachuk. As great as Bobrovsky's been, he didn't start the playoffs. And Tkachuk had back-to-back OT winners on the weekend and has been leading them in scoring. Listen, it's one of those two guys for sure. I think it's safe to say. We'll get to more of this in a minute. We got Joe Pascucci coming up. T. Conopoli with the super chat. Thanks for the super chat, T. Conopoli. Fire Chevy, hire the Hunter brothers, Mark as GM, Dale coach, and promote Bones to the director of hockey ops. There's a take. I'm sure you guys can all respond to T. Conopoli's thoughts on that in the chat as well. As I say, we've got lots to cover, but I'm really looking forward to our next visit out to Hockey Hall of Fame HQ with our pal Joe Pascucci. Before we do that, though, got to give a big shout out to our friends at Modern Man Barbershops, now with 8 locations in Winnipeg, including the newest locations on Pembina Highway and Plessis Road. And Modern Man Plessis is hosting a grand opening event this Sunday, May 28th. I was at the grand opening event a couple weeks ago for Pembina. It was awesome. It's 12 to 5 p.m. You'll get a haircut for $9 and proceeds going to the Prairie Wildlife Rehab Center. Plus, the first 100 people get a free lunch from their neighbors over at Crave Kitchen and Deli. You can visit their Instagram at Modern Man Barbershops for more info, but mark that down. Great deal. Little something to eat, great haircut at a great price for a great cause. Modern Man Plessis grand opening event, Sunday, May 28th from 12 to 5 p.m. Listen, we got summer weather coming up this week and all of next week. We're already feeling summer right now. Why not make 2023 the year you take the plunge with Aquatech? Visit aqua-tech.ca to design your own custom pool. Their team can provide on-the-spot pricing from designers as well as financing options that suit you. And whole home renovations start with Aquatech as well. With thousands of renos as their foundation, let them upgrade any space in your home. Aquatech is ready to make your reno dreams a reality. Learn more about design, pricing, and financing options at aqua-tech.ca. Well, May long weekend is behind us, but we are really, as I said, right into summer, which means motorcycles, golf carts, cutting the grass. Manitoba Battery's there for you. The gang of Manitoba Battery can get you hooked up with the right fit for your motorcycle at the best price. Or if you need a lawn tractor battery, you can get one with 280 cranking amps for $42 when you return your cord. That same battery's $30 more at the big box stores. And not only are they the best prices, but they're the most convenient. When you spend more than $60, Manitoba Battery will bring it right to your door anywhere in Winnipeg for free. To learn more, visit them at manitobabattery.com, and you can always pop by and see them at 1026 Logan Avenue. And just before we bring in Scooch, a big cheers to our friends at Canadian Club, Canada's favorite Canadian whiskey and the official spirit of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and WST. Won't be long before we're up maybe meeting around the Rum Hut at IG Field. But in the meantime, you pick up Canadian Club at your local Manitoba liquor marts and take a look for Canadian Club and Ginger Ale premixed cocktails now in 473 milliliter cans at liquor marts and beer vendors around the city. All right, this is going to be fun. We've had Joe Pascucci on a number of times with us, but Scooch is now moonlighting at the Hockey Hall of Fame and joins us now from the TO. What's going on, Joe? How are you?
I'm doing very well, and I hope the same for you.
Yeah, no, listen, it's great. Show's going well. Lots of local things for us to talk about. Listen, We'll get to what you're doing in a minute, but I have to ask you, we've talked about Paul Maurice before, his role here in Winnipeg. What has been going through your mind as you've seen this incredible run by the Florida Panthers? Really, one toe save from Sergei Bobrovsky away from being out in 5 games in the first round, like the home team here. And now 1 win away from going to the Cup Final.
Yeah, what's that old saying in hockey? I'll show you a great coach, or show you a great goaltender, and I'll show you a great coach at the same time. I mean, Bobrovsky is my, Conn Smythe MVP for these playoffs. He has been amazing. This is the reason they paid him $10 million, and it took a few years, but he's finally earning his contract. But you have to say he's been the difference. He is the reason why they're just a game away from the Stanley Cup. I think Carolina has done everything possibly that they can to try and score, but Bobrovsky he's just making save after save. That puck must look like a beach ball to him because he hasn't really missed anything.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a guy that lost his job earlier this year, was not starting at the beginning of the playoffs for Alex Lyon, and credit where credit is due. I mean, Maurice said on the bench it was a 50-50 decision, but he figured that, Bob, with his experience, was the guy that would go in. And I still think about that breakaway with 5 seconds left in Game 5. Brad Marchand going in, able to ice the Panthers. It doesn't happen. It goes to OT, and they have really not looked back since. It's something to be said. But the other thing, and Joe, this sort of ties into what's happened or hasn't happened with the Winnipeg Jets in this offseason. There's huge questions about players that, have contracts with 1 year remaining. Mark Scheifele, Pierre-Luc Dubois, or at least of team control. Connor Hellebuck as well. The Florida Panthers won the President's Trophy last year and then made probably the biggest trade of the offseason, trading Weegar and Huberdeau and a first-round pick to get Matthew Tkachuk. This is the guy that we're seeing night in and night out, the guy that they were trying to acquire. But I mean, that's sort of a swing for the fences move. Not really something that we've seen from Winnipeg, but it certainly is paying for itself right now with what we're seeing in the playoffs for the Cats.
Yeah, you got to give Zito credit in Florida for making that trade. I mean, obviously the Calgary Flames, their hands were tied once Tkachuk said he wasn't going to re-sign there. But, and Trey Living did make a really good trade on behalf of the Calgary Flames. It just didn't work out that way, it seemed, during this past season. Huberdeau just wasn't the same player, but Matthew Tkachuk, what a leader. At times, though, he's been ineffective, but, at crunch time, he just seems to always be around the moment, with the 2 overtime goals. And, of course, he got an assist on last night's only goal of the game. And, he is just an incredible factor. He just imposes his will like his brother Brady does in Ottawa. They just seem to impose their will on the game, and they have such an astonishing effect, and I'm thinking, what if the Jets had not drafted Patrick Laine and had drafted Matthew Tkachuk? Where would this team be? But Patrick Laine was the obvious choice after Austin Matthews, but as it turns out, you'd rather have Matthew Tkachuk on your team any day. over many of the players in that first round in that draft. He is just an incredible force out there. He is Brad Marchand on steroids.
Yeah, he's got a lot of Brad Marchand in him. And,
Yeah.
well, listen, and Marchand's a pretty incredible goal scorer as well. I mean, he really does it all. It's the attitude of Matthew Tkachuk, though, that I think that is, like, there's some intangibles. There's a lot of things that you can measure. There's a lot of things that there's stats for, analytics for. The one thing that there really isn't is that passion that guys play for. And Matthew Tkachuk, as I said, is somewhat of a unicorn or a very, very small group. And this is the time of year that that you see it. And, man, we're seeing it on a nightly basis right now. It really has been incredible, Florida Panthers. What do you make of the Jets situation, though? I mean, we talked about that big deal that Florida made last year. There is a lot on the table right now for Kevin Cheveldayoff and the Winnipeg Jets well, I'm sure they've figured out what they would like to do. How do you see this shaking out? And put it this way, in your opinion, Joe, what is the best course of action for the Winnipeg Jets considering all these seismic decisions they need to make?
Well, I think, one of the best things, and I'm not sure I'm not the only one who says this, is trade Pierre-Luc Dubois before the season begins. We saw, his disappearing act in the playoffs, and especially in that final game to Vegas, and I think when Rick Bowness lashed out at the end of the game, he was talking about two specific players, and that was Pierre-Luc Dubois and oh my God, his name escapes me, Kyle Connor. Excuse me, how could I forget Kyle Connor? Those were the two players that just seemed to vanish in that series against Vegas after game one. Adam Lowry was obviously the best player for the Jets in that series, but they needed Pierre-Luc Dubois to step up. And the two playoff series, for the Jets, the one against Montreal and this one, he was just not there. After the first game of the Vegas series, he kind of vanished, in my opinion.
Listen, I've had this conversation with friends, and I'm sure I've said it on the show. I mean, how in the world was the same guy wearing the jersey that was Pierre-Luc Dubois in game number 1 of that series and Pierre-Luc Dubois in game number 5 of that series? I mean, even if you didn't know anything about hockey, I mean, you just watched that first game and then watched the 5th game, anyone would be asking, like, wait a second, is that the same guy? Because, I mean, and that's what's so frustrating, and I'm sure it was so frustrating for Bones. You saw what was possible when he's playing engaged at the highest level. He can be, a guy that is a real difference maker at the toughest times of the year. And then, I mean, just basically an absolute non-factor when you'd expect a team to be playing for their lives.
Yeah, and maybe that's just who he is. A leopard can't change his spots. Maybe that's who Pierre-Luc Dubois is. He can, be an outstanding hockey player. He can be a leader out there, as he was for Columbus in that series that they beat the Maple Leafs in. He can be that player, but at other times he chooses not to be that player, to be somewhat indifferent. And so, I mean, I think that he could have been, and he may be, turn into the hockey player that we all think he is. But right now, he's just hot and cold too often to bring back for another season, and then eventually have to trade before the deadline, because he's not going to re-sign in Winnipeg.
Yeah, that's certainly what we are led to believe. The other thing that was so incredible about Bones' rant at the end of that series was that it wasn't just about a no-show by his team in Game 5. I mean, he couldn't help himself but to mention that it was the same crap that he was dealing with in the last couple months of the season. And I found that interesting that he would go there at that point. But to me, it wasn't just about Dubois and Connor and, their best players being so much better than their players in that game. It was also about what he'd been dealing with Mark Scheifele, I felt, for at the end. And I mean, Scheifele is such an important player on this club, and it was obvious that Bones had some real problems in getting him to play Well, listen, they had to eventually move him to the wing. I mean, did you take that too? I mean, this wasn't just about that game. That was an eruption of frustration that had dated back over 2 months.
Yes, and he had, I think, 2 previous outbursts after games. The one where he questioned the team's pride. You got to have pride, and I think there were 2 occasions where he lashed out after a game. Was it the Islanders game where that was supposed to be the bounce back game, and the whole team was a no-show? So his outburst didn't come as a surprise. He had already done it a couple of times this season. What's shocking is how and Paul Maurice obviously had the same experience. He couldn't get the team as a whole to play the right way. And especially after all the success this Jets team had, their first place in the conference, and then they just completely collapse, much like they did in 2019 when they were leading, first place in the Central, and then they just completely collapsed in January, right to the end of the season.
Well, exactly. And I mean, I think if you want to, if we're doing an autopsy on the window of the championship contending window of the Winnipeg Jets that, goes back to that run in 18. And many of us thought that, man, this team is set up for the next 3 or 4 years to be back there and be in the mix, is the second half of the 2019 season when a lot of these issues became very apparent, Joe. And, by the time, the next year came around, you do make a few moves. All sorts of theories as to why the Jets felt that they needed to trade Patrick Laine. I've got my own thoughts on that. But, they never got it back to that point. And obviously you miss a guy like Dustin Byfuglien. That's huge. But
yeah, except for one series. And the one team they seem to always play their best against and they're focused is the Edmonton Oilers. That series against Edmonton and even the games this season, they play the right way. But, after that victory over the Oilers in 4 straight, they completely went back to playing the wrong way against the Canadiens.
Yeah, too many individuals. Well, and you see the difference right now. And we can include the Leafs and a couple of others. When you watch the Florida Panthers and the Carolina Hurricanes play right now, those 2 teams are playing at an engagement level that I'm not even sure we saw from the Jets at any point this season. It's just there's another gear of commitment on every single shift from the players. And listen, Maurice is getting that out of Florida, and I think Rod Brind'Amour might squeeze more out of his team than anybody in the National Hockey League. And yet, obviously they're going to, in all likelihood, fall short. Now down 3-0, but there is a lot of credit where credit is due. Reem, did we just lose Joe?
He's there. Hold on. Oh,
let's try.
Oh, one sec. Lost his sound there. I'll get it back.
I lost the video too. I'm not sure whether you.
Oh, you lost it. I can see him.
You can see that, but we will try and back. Joe, can you hear me? We might need to reconnect with the Scooch.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. In the Oilers, that Oilers series, and Joe's exactly right. And for a long time, Winnipeg fans, we will always hold on to the sweep of the Edmonton Oilers, considering what Edmonton did to Winnipeg for so long when many of us were growing up. Unfortunately, a big part of that is the fact that there were no fans. And it just sort of is this outlier of a period of time that for a lot of people, it almost seems like it doesn't count. I was just saying, Joe, that Oilers series, as great as it was, and we'll always remember, whenever I go in the morning in Edmonton with Dustin Nielsen, I always find a way to work in the Jets sweep of Edmonton. But it is this outlier because, of course, there's no fans too. You see, it's so different than everything else that we've seen. And but I'm glad you brought that up because that was the highlight, frankly, in the last few seasons.
Yeah, and even this season when they were on their losing all those games and had that Saturday night game against. Right, and Connor Hellebuyck struggled for the first 2 periods, but the Jets won that game 7-5. Hellebuyck came back to life in the third period and was the Hellebuck of old in that game. But that's the only team that they seem to really focus in on and play the right way for whatever reason. Maybe they just don't want to be embarrassed by McDavid and Draisaitl.
Put your GM hat on for a minute. What are you doing with Hellebuck? He is the franchise player, if you ask me. He's so important. He's going to cost a lot of money. He's going to cost a lot of money. Yeah, listen, I'm sort of with you as well. Even if it's a Bobrovsky type deal, pushing $9.5, $10 million.
Why not? You can't win without a goaltender. You can't win the Stanley Cup without goaltending, right? And if the Jets are going to be, competing for a Stanley Cup, then they have to have goaltending. And if you trade Hellebuck, then you admit you're in a rebuild. And they say they're not in a rebuild.
I'll say one guy that's pretty pumped about what's happening with Florida right now is probably Ray Petkow, Hellebuck's agent. Maybe the agent for Sorokin as well. Going, you can't win with an expensive goalie? Actually, it's happening right in front of our eyes.
But Hellebuck also has to play better, because I don't think we saw him at his best, in that series against Vegas, except for game one. I mean, he had his moments, but, he has to stand on his head more often.
Hey, Joe, you're out there in Southern Ontario. What percentage of conversations over the long weekend revolved around the drama of the Toronto Maple Leafs? What a wild Friday, huh?
Yeah, it's incredible. You thought that the Jets were the only dysfunctional team in Canada, but hey, here come the Toronto Maple Leafs. And they're gonna do it one better than Winnipeg. And yeah, Kyle Dubas last week with his press conference on Wednesday, and you knew something was up. And on Friday, the morning, I'm listening to the radio stations in Toronto, and they knew something was going to drop that day. It's just, it's the weekend, a long weekend. They're going to drop something today. And then, of course, you have the press conference by Shanahan, who has been a Kyle Dubas backer. Because he let Lou Lamoriello go, Hall of Fame general manager and builder of hockey teams, is so that he could keep Kyle Dubas in the organization. And maybe he felt that, Dubas had betrayed him a little bit, asking maybe for more money, or maybe asking for more autonomy in decision making. So, and then, I know that, Dubas had said that he had no interest in, working for anyone else but the Toronto Maple Leafs. But apparently, I guess that he's going to interview for the job in Pittsburgh. That was quick.
Yeah, things change quite quickly when you get a pink slip.
Yeah,
I really did. And again, I know some people, there was a lot of different ways you could have taken the initial press conference. I'll admit, and maybe I'm a bit of a cynic, I did think that a lot of that was posturing and maybe a little bit of negotiating in public. It's quite clear that, from Brendan Shanahan and potentially the board, they felt that Dubas overplayed his hand, and they've got a mess right now. They're talking about, and we're going to get into a little bit later on, some of the possibilities for that job. But, their franchise player, Austin Matthews, they need to figure it out before the 1st of July, because if he's not interested in sticking around, I'm not sure that they could possibly trade him before July 1st and get that clarity that he won't be there. But they're running a very, very risky operation going in. He's got a full no move on the 1st of July. It basically takes him right to free agency. And I'll say this, for all the platitudes and lauding of Kyle Dubas on the job that he's done, I don't think he did a very good job with negotiating those contracts. He got bent over by Matthews, by Marner. The one guy that they actually held out with was William Nylander.
But they did give him close to what he wanted.
Oh yeah.
So, with Marner, strategic release of the financial details. Marner wasn't signing. That kind of embarrassed Mitch into signing a lower contract. But
just south of $11 million.
Well, it was lower than what he was asking for. But Kyle Dubas' credit, at the trading deadline this year with, hardly any cap room or space, he's able to get a lot of the players, a lot of quality players that, that you would have thought would make the Maple Leafs, Stanley Cup contenders, and many believe that it did. So it's just, but when your two best players, Marner and Matthews, aren't a factor, you can't win without your best players being your best players.
Hey, Joe Pascucci's with us on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Joe, just before we talk about what you got going on the Hockey Hall of Fame, it's been a bizarre, I don't want to say bizarre, but I mean, it's about the quietest Blue Bomber training camp I can ever remember. I mean, most of the usual suspects are back. The unfinished business tour will begin in a few weeks. You got Sergio Castillo came in for the kicking issue, which was the big topic in the chat all summer long. It's almost like, let's get on with it at this point. I mean, is there anything that is of interest to you from this training camp other than hopefully all the guys get through with it healthy?
Yeah, and it's like, the gang's all here again. And I just hope that this season there's more of a challenge to the Blue Bombers during the regular season than there obviously was last year. Because, when you're winning as easy as they did on most occasions, you kind of lose your competitive edge. And for, some reason, the last two Grey Cups, though they won the one against Hamilton, they really didn't have their A game as they had during the regular season. So I'd like to see, more competitive games against the Bombers during the regular season. I mean, I think they should still win the West. This team is as strong as you've ever seen for the Blue Bombers, and unfinished business. That was the slogan in 2002 after the Grey Cup loss of 2001. So let's hope it's a different outcome in 2023, for the Bombers and unfinished business. But there's no reason why this team shouldn't go back to the Grey Cup another year.
No,
just like the team did in the 50s and 60s.
I'm with you on that. The expectations are high, and I think especially with Nathan Rourke going down to the Jacksonville Jaguars, I mean, I think the BC Lions certainly on paper were the biggest threat to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Calgary always seems to be there. I mean, they'll just wake up and they'll be 11-win team and they'll be in the playoffs. What is next for Edmonton and Saskatchewan after real rough seasons is going to be really interesting, especially in Saskatchewan with that swap of Trevor Harris for Cody Fajardo with the QB position.
I'm not a big Trevor Harris fan. So I consider Saskatchewan still going to struggle this year. Edmonton, they hopefully, for the sake of the league, they'll be better, because that's usually one of the strongest franchises in the Canadian football league. BC, Nathan Rourke, if he was back, I would definitely had put them as the Bombers' main threat for 2023. But I think the Bombers, with all the players they've got back, they are hungry to make amends for last season. So I think Bomber fans should look forward to another exciting season at IG Field.
The East to me is fascinating. I mean, it is as wide open, I think, as we've seen in a long time. I think the Argos probably take a little bit of a step back with Chad Kelly as the quarterback. I'm not sure he has the maturity maybe to be that leader. I'll tell you who really intrigues me. It's the Ottawa Redblacks with our old pal Bobby Dice getting a chance to be the head coach. I just think he is such a great leader of men. I think that he will get these guys to play for him. And if Masoli can stay healthy and they actually have a legitimate CFL quarterback, I think that's a team that could surprise this year, Joe.
Yeah, definitely cheering for Bobby Dice, the former St. Vital Mustang junior player. He definitely is one of the good guys in Canadian football, and you want nothing, but success for him and for Ottawa. They did have, when they first came back, the Red Blacks, they were great. They were a better than expected football team, winning the Grey Cup, getting to a couple of other Grey Cup finals. But, the losing ways have returned, and that's got to turn around quickly. Or, the football in the nation's capital will be, will be in a huge tailspin, and fan interest will, again, be on the decline there. Montreal, Alouettes, I really don't know. They lost a lot of their players because of their ownership situation when it was in a flux. So they're a team that I think will take a step back. I don't think they'll be a playoff team this year. I'm definitely hoping for Ottawa. And you're right about Toronto. I mean, a lot of question marks there. Andrew Harris, of course, is back, but he's going to be more in a support role this year in his final season of Canadian football. And I hope for the sake of the CFL in the Toronto market that the Argos don't take too much of a huge step back, because it seems that in the past, most recent past, every time they win a Grey Cup, they miss the playoffs the following season. And so that's not good. And you've got to like Hamilton's chances with Bo Levi there. And I think Bo Levi has something to prove this season after what happened in Calgary. And I think that Hamilton, will be the number one team at the end of the regular season.
Oh, Bo Levi is going to be carrying around an Andrew Harris-sized chip on his shoulder. I can pretty much guarantee that. Joe Pascucci's with us. Scooch, it was so great talking to you off air, getting you ready to come on and find out that you're doing some work at the Hockey Hall of Fame. You know, for all your incredible career and what you've done, it seems like you were put on earth to be in that office doing this. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so I'm here at the Doc Siemens Resource Center of the Hockey Hall of Fame. It's at the Ford Performance Center. This is where the Maple Leafs have their practices, and all the visiting teams, when they have practices in Toronto, they come here to the Ford Performance Center. And so this is kind of a warehouse of all the huge amount of hockey artifacts that the Hall of Fame has. They can't all put them at their location downtown, so they have them here. And so my job is, they have this vast video, film, audio archive. And so I'm digitizing the video archive that they have, and trying to digitize as much as I can. Like right now, I am digitizing hockey from the 1981 Canada Cup on Betamax tapes. For those of us who can remember Betamax. And the hardest thing was to find a Betamax player that actually worked. So we found one, and we're just trying to get through all these tapes from the World Championships going back to 1977 all the way up to the late 80s, and get those digitized so that they're preserved forever.
Speaking of this, let me just, Remis, if you can, let's play this clip that Joe sent us over. And this is this is a penalty shot from 1937?
1937, January 12th. It's the New York Americans against the Montreal Maroons. And taking the penalty shot is half ends. And this is how they used to do it. Think of a soccer penalty shot, and you'll see the puck. It's in a circle just inside the blue line, and the player skates up to the puck and shoots, and he must shoot the puck from within the circle. And in this case, Hap Ems, as you're going to see, Hap Ems is the player who takes it, and he scores. Like, how you can score from that far out on a wrist shot.
I just imagine that today.
Yeah,
like in today's day and age, even with the sticks, if that was a penalty shot today in the National Hockey League, what would the success rate be? 1%? 2% maybe?
I would only imagine 2%. And maybe with a Bufflin slap shot, it might be higher. But so this was one of the tapes that I had to digitize. But so you can identify the teams, and then you try to find out, a player or two that you can, okay, so who's that? Who scored? Which game did he score? We didn't know which game he scored. So I've got to go through all the NHL, game sheets between the New York Americans and the Montreal Maroons, but they don't list penalty shots on those game sheets. So then I got to go through all the old newspaper archives and find out which one. And we found the game that he scored. And in the course of the research, we found that Hap Ems, the player who took the penalty shot there, had taken a penalty shot the week earlier and didn't score. The NHL knew about the one that was on January 12th, 1937, but they didn't know about the one the week before. So here at the Hall, we informed them of this. They researched it on their own, and they've added it to the official NHL record. So I've had a hand in changing the NHL record book.
This is so cool, Joe.
Yeah,
by the way, before we go, and this has been so much fun, You got a couple other neat things to show us there behind the scenes that your HQ at the HHOF?
I know this is partially radio, and for you, those of you may want to watch this on the YouTube feed. I'm gonna have to change the camera around just to give you a different perspective. So this is sort of my office here, and we're doing some construction here at the Dock Seaman Resource Center. I got to get my pass, otherwise I won't be able to do this. I know you're kind of crunched for time.
Oh, this is great. This is great. Yes. Audio listeners, make sure to go and check out the end of our interview with Scooch here. Holy smokes.
So 4,000 hockey sticks. They can't all keep them downtown. So here's 4,000 hockey sticks, from various players, teams, and they go all the way back to the late 1900s. There's even a hockey stick from the old Winnipeg Victorias. And I pulled out two to show you. You see the one here on the left. That is the stick that Stan Mikita used to score his 250th NHL goal. And obviously you can see the big banana blade curve on it.
What a curve.
So that is incredible. And then the stick here on the right, that is the stick that Darren Quint used to score the two fastest goals 4 seconds apart. So they're both here at the hall. And of course they get this, moved into the displays on occasion, but they exchange some of the sticks downtown and they bring them here, and they bring the ones here downtown.
My God, man, the stories in that room, Joe.
Yeah.
This has been so cool. So cool. I just have to say, it is so great to see you having such a good time out there. And I got to tell you, we'll definitely you can give us some more Hockey Hall of Fame stories in in a month or two, or whenever we get you back on. And I know you'll be all over the Canadian Football League in the summer, so hopefully you'll have time to join us again on Winnipeg Sports Talk at some point in the future. But this has been a lot of fun, Joe. Thanks for doing this.
Okay. Thanks for asking.
Hey,
see you in a few months.
Get back to the video machines and the digitizing. Crank up that Betamax.
I have to. It's incredible.
Thanks, bud. We'll talk to you soon. There is the man, our pal Scooch, Joe Pascucci, now doing some archival work at the Hockey Hall of Fame. And, of course, you know him as the longtime voice of sports in Winnipeg and sports director for Global and CKND back in the day. All right, we've got that hammer coming up. Hey, did you get a barbecue on the weekend? I hope you did. If you're looking for great things to throw on the queue, get on down to Vita Health Fresh Market and stock up on some delicious Vita Market grass-fed bison and beef steaks. And while you're at it, pick up natural and organic supplements, beauty products, groceries, and Winnipeg's largest assortment of local products too, all at great prices. And when you order online, you can now choose same-day local delivery. Just place your order at myvita.ca before 11 a.m. and you'll get your order that day. Orders placed after 11 a.m. will be delivered the next day. Vita Health Fresh Market, empowering people to lead healthy lives. 7 Winnipeg locations and online at myvita.ca. Wallace & Wallace, our great friends from the Unsung Hero program, of course, are hard at work this summer as Winnipeg's fencing and overhead door specialists, serving residential and commercial customers since 1946. If you need the security and protection of a new fence, or if winter did a number on your old one, they've got you covered with vinyl, ornamental, welded wire, chain link, or wood fences. And gang, if it's time to replace your garage door, they've got Winnipeg's largest selection of overhead garage doors. 452-2700 is the number. The Wallace & Wallace team will arrange a time to come out and give you a free estimate. You can also visit them at wallacefences.com or pop down to their showroom on Lawson Road off of Kenniston. Fellas, wedding season's coming up. How's the closet looking? If you need to up your menswear game heading into spring and summer, you need to get on down to F Apparel. Custom suits beginning at $400, along with chinos, golf pants, custom shirts, both tucked and untucked styles, and an incredible selection of menswear accessories. In a wedding party, talk to them about getting suits for the fellas, 15% off discount for all wedding parties when you get your suits at F. And if you've got a 2023 high school grad, hook them up with a new suit. And with that new suit, F Apparel will include a free custom shirt and tie. F Apparel's at 190 Smith Street downtown. Make an appointment online at that's EPHapparel.com. And a big shout out to Nick and Nikki DQ. Got a text from a very happy DQ Nick on the weekend that shot a personal all-time record. I think he was 74 or something at Breezy. Very, very impressive, Nick. And I know where he probably went to celebrate. One of the 4 Nick and Nikki DQs. New summer Blizzard flavors are in. All your favorite ice cream treats, dilly bars, obviously all the novelties available. And if you need a DQ ice cream cake or Blizzard cake, you can also get them at any of the 4 Nick and Nikki DQs, or hit them up on Instagram at DQ Manitoba for a quick and easy pickup at any of the Nick and Nikki DQs, DQ Northgate, Polo Park, St. Anne's, and the DQ in Niverville. All right, let's get a little hammer time going on WST. We welcome in Jeff Hamilton from the Winnipeg Free Press. Hammer, what's up? How was your long weekend?
Huss, it was good. My long weekend, I stayed in the city. I celebrated a couple birthdays. My mom's birthday was on Monday, and my little nephew's birthday was on Sunday. Saturday, I did get out on the waters, but that's just code for garage sailing. So that season started in earnest this year. So this summer rather. So pretty good week. Had it all off, but also squeezed in some work. So a little bit of everything, man. Good weekend.
Hey, when you're hitting the waters early in the season, is that a better time? Is there a lot of stuff that's been waiting in people's homes all winter long to then be unleashed to the community through the early May garage sales?
It's hard to put it into words, Huss, to be honest with you. But I'll try. You know what? It's funny. This was actually late, especially given the weather that we've had. It usually starts in April. That's when people, that's when the hardcores get out there. And so you got to check Kijiji. I don't even know if the people are posting on Kijiji or other places that let you know. Facebook's another good place to find out garage sales. I kind of just go around and look for signs and figure things out. But yeah, this is usually the best time. This has been like, there's another thing. This has been like a thing that happened over the last few years. It used to be, get out early on Saturday, get the best stuff. I don't usually go out on Sunday because most of the good stuff's gone, but Sunday is good for those who want to pick up deals. People are looking to get rid of their stuff. But my point in even bringing this up is Friday's the new night. There's like garage sales are now Friday night lights, we call it. So it's 4 to 8. It's not quite dark out. So, but it's that's when things get rolling. So I consider myself somewhat of a hardcore, but there's like hardcores who are out there, combing the waters, if you will, and Friday getting all the best stuff usually taken up. So the weekend's kind of taking a bit of a hit, but certainly glad to be back out there. It's a great place to be.
Well, that's good. You can get it out on Friday, because otherwise you got to behave yourself Friday if you want to be early bird getting the worm at the good sales on Saturday. Jeff Hamilton's with us. All right, great talking to you, man. We'll talk to just a garage sale update. Listen, I want to get into a bunch of hockey topics. I know you weren't out at the camp this week, but I mention the Bombers just because normally this would be a time where we'd be talking about all these big training camp stories. I'm not sure if I'm missing a lot, or are we just waiting for the season to get going, check out a little bit of preseason action, and then fire it up for game 1 of 18?
You know what? That's really what it feels like. It's just because, we've talked about everyone who follows the Bombers even casually understands that, this team has been, for the most part, been able to just return all its players, if minus a few here or there. So especially this year, with what they were able to do in the off season, bring a lot of people back. Obviously, bring in key additions like Kenny Lawler back into the mix to add to an already pretty good receiver group. They have their quarterback. They have their DNs. All these good positions, right? Their running backs in place. There's really no question. Sergio Castillo got signed. He blew up the whole narrative around, the kicking competition, if you will. And so it really does feel like a waiting game. Let's get these games started, especially when you compare it to other markets around the league, right? And I wrote this in my CFL rundown column a couple weeks ago. I think it was a couple weeks ago. I don't think it was last week's, but maybe it was. The weeks are blending in. But even every team besides maybe the Winnipeg Blue Bombers have a question at quarterback. Even the guys returning. I mean, if you look across the league, I won't, I'll make it real quick, but if you look at the West, I mean, Jake Maier in Calgary, okay, it's his first year of being the undisputed starter. And we all know last season, Bo Levi Mitchell replaced him in the playoffs. Edmonton has Taylor Cornelius. He has an unbelievable group of receivers that they plucked around the league. Geno Lewis, topping that list, obviously. Stephen Dunbar from Hamilton, another giant last season. And so, but how is Taylor Cornelius going to do in in another year? Is he going to be better? Are they going to have the O-line to protect him? You look at BC. Well, sorry, see you later, Rourkeville. Now you have Vernon Adams, and you go back to, you might like him that he got a little bit of reps with you last year, but he's got to be one of the most inconsistent quarterbacks out there. Trevor Harris in Saskatchewan, right? I mean, the new era in Ryderville after a disastrous season last year. Montreal has Cody Fajardo. Speaking of Saskatchewan, how is he going to do? You look at Toronto. Chad Kelly got the keys to the to the Grey Cup defending club. I mean, that's going to be an interesting one. Ottawa might be the most secure in a sense, and that's because they have Jeremiah Masoli, but he had a broken leg last year, and he comes into the year. What's he going to look like? And of course, Bo Levi Mitchell. I was totally prepared to see this guy in a TSN panel job, and now he's in the first of a 3-year deal, monster deal in Hamilton. And, the narrative around him is that he's a gunslinger again. He was straight up replaced last year. So anyways, that's just the one quarterback position. And it's all roundabout way of saying it's just boring in Bomberville right now. And I think that's the way the fans like it after so many years of dysfunction. And it's no surprise that the Bombers are, the favorites again to go to the Grey Cup and potentially win their third in the last 4 years.
I think we can all assume that Sergio is going to be the kicker. Will Leggio be on the roster, and will he be the punter?
Great question. Look,
it's all I could come up with.
It's funny. He's in a competition, but it's an interesting competition because if Sergio Castillo is the kicker and the place kicker, I think we can all assume that will be the case. You don't go Canadian American, so they've already kind of trimmed off their American punters because it just doesn't make any sense. So it's a fight between Leggio and a couple global kickers, right? I mean, I'd have to recall their names here now, but I wrote about a couple of them too. It's just one of those, it's one of those things where you have to have either have a global or a Canadian there. So I think Mark Leggio is in a good position to become the punter here, but by no means is he a slam dunk, and it's going to be a competition. If he doesn't get his kicks, his punts, angled the right way and his kicks off well, I think there's a pretty short leash here. It's hard to say one way or the other, but the good news is we'll find out here sooner than later. And a lot of it will probably be determined about how they perform in a game, because as much as, they go out early in the morning, so we don't get to see them a whole ton during camp, because they want to be out there kicking with nobody on the field and obviously outside of actual drills that require returning, they don't get a lot of action in practice, right? So that battle's kind of being done quietly behind the scenes, but I think we're all going to get a good look at beginning this Saturday in Edmonton, the preseason, where those are live bullets, and we'll see who can perform under that kind of pressure. And I'll tell you what, I don't think Mark Leggio has the benefit of the doubt. I mean, if it's an even competition, I'm not saying he loses out, but I also don't think that he's necessarily the favorable guy in that position either. So again, we'll see what happens, but it's pretty funny we're talking about the punting role when it just kind of goes to show just the state in which the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are at right now.
Training camp headline number 1: who's going to be the punter? That is good problems to have. Everyone else in the league, I think, envies what Winnipeg has going into this season. Jeff Hamilton from the Free Press is with us. Hammer, we usually are kind of focusing on the Bombers and Jets. Obviously, the ice fell short in their championship series against the Seattle Thunderbirds, and we will get a chance to see Brad Lambert continue on in the Mem Cup this weekend. You're hearing anything on this team? I mean, we often talk about how tight-lipped the Jets are about things. The Ice might be even more tight-lipped on everything surrounding their tenure at the U of M. How do you see this going? I mean, I know, and Mike Sawatsky from your paper wrote earlier on that, they have not completed the things that they said to the Western Hockey League they would. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. But any insight as to what the future of the ice is now that this incredible season is behind them?
Yeah, really no other insight to add to it, but there are some things that I think you can point to and make an argument, or at the very least not be surprised that they're not here next season. And that is, when the ice relocated from Kootenay, it was under, there was a lot of anger coming out of BC, right? Coming out of that market, because they were taking the team and bringing them to Winnipeg, and there was arguments this was the plan all along. And depending on who you talk to and who you ask, you get different answers. But the reality is the WHL approved the move because they believed in the ownership, led by Greg Fettis, obviously, that they would be able to build an arena, that they had the wherewithal, the property, the abilities, all those things, and importantly, the time frame to get an operable building, that reaches the WHL standards, which includes, several thousand people. I think the minimum is like 3,500 or 4,000 people, and that's the minimum. They were obviously looking for a 6,500 seat, arena plan. I, laid that all out prior to the announcement years ago now, and that it's supposed to be this beautiful development area of commercial. I think there might even have been, there's lots of, and it wasn't just for the ice. In fact, the ice were going to be a tenant in the building, right? They weren't going to be the prime, maybe they were the showcase hockey team, but this is supposed to pretty much centralize the minor hockey community in the south end of the city. And there was a lot of plans in place, like twinning the highways out in Kenaston to make sure that there was not a ton of traffic, that people could get in and out easily. I mean, this was the plan. So with that plan absolutely in the garbage can right now, there really is no end in sight. There is seemingly no light at the end of the tunnel. I know this group is confident in their ability to get an arena eventually, but it hasn't hit the timeline of the WHL. And the reality is the ice can fight and complain about language. They took exception, obviously, to the word fine that, my colleague Mike Sawatsky, wrote about, and that every team got a lump sum on behalf of the Winnipeg Ice. Fine. Don't call it a fine. Call it a didn't live up to your promise tax. Because guess what? The Winnipeg Ice paid out to all those other teams because, they were only housing they weren't housing a big enough arena, and therefore the gate revenue weren't there. So the thing is that with all that up in the air, I think the WHL, is probably at their wits' end. I imagine, as you mentioned, pretty tight lips. I don't think this is something that's going to happen overnight. But it is something that if they can't get an arena deal done, they can't have a team here. So it just honestly, at this point, with everything you're hearing, with everything you're reading, it just feels like an inevitable move. But we'll wait and see. Anything can happen. And the other part is, I know I get a lot of emails from people saying, well, what about Canada Life Center? Well, no. Like Canada, first of all, True North is a competitor. Secondly, they already have the Manitoba Moose, so they're already working around two hockey schedules. To add a third team in, not only is that a tough sell, it's taking money away from your other properties, as well as the opportunity for True North to have concerts and other entertainment stuff over the winter. So that doesn't seem like a possibility. There's just not enough dates.
At the end of the day, there is not enough dates. So you can ask Kevin Donnelly how challenging it is just to schedule Moose games in, and what that does to some of their abilities to, get concerts that they'd like to have in. Exactly. When you have that busy of a building right now.
Look, they'll never say it, but the Manitoba Moose are a little bit of an inconvenience to that exact part. You know what I mean? Like, they would rather have a concert over a weekend than have 2-3 Manitoba Moose, games, financially speaking, obviously. And so, excuse me, I'm thinking that unless the Moose, and I don't think they're planning to relocate anytime soon, I know that they certainly appreciate obviously how close that team is for call-ups and whatnot. Yeah. But I don't see an opportunity for another team to come in, rent that ice until, as long as the Jets have both the Moose and the Jets playing there.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking with some friends on the weekend. We were going back over old Jets and looking at careers and whatnot, and just thinking about, like, in 1.0 having the farm team in Moncton and then early on in St. John's. I mean, the expense, cost, and time it takes to get players back and forth. I mean, I think they realize that there probably is some losses as it comes to, maybe some events that they're not able to put on that would help the bottom line. But both for travel savings, I'm sure they are significant, but also just the operations of the club, having the team that close. Certainly there are some big benefits. We were talking with Scooch earlier. It was always
saw that.
Thought was so the Jets were going to be the Canadian team that everyone was sort of focusing on with all the big questions. And then the Leafs just sort of roll in with that insane week, finishing up with Brendan Shanahan's presser on Friday. And now that entire organization is seemingly in, one of those periods that I think people will look back decades later as a key moment. I mean, what did you make of Shanahan's press conference and the fact that Dubas is out and now apparently, potentially, maybe even up for the job in Pittsburgh after saying it was Toronto or nothing last week in his presser?
Yeah, my takeaway was clearly, Dubas overplayed his leverage. I mean, he obviously knew how much he was liked in that building. He certainly has a rapport with a lot of the key players in that locker room. But just to seem like the disconnect between him and Shanahan, right? We're led to believe that, they were incredibly, and they must have been incredibly close throughout their tenure, having to work so closely together. But it seemed like that relationship, seemed to have a little bit of cracks near the end, right? I mean, they weren't sitting beside each other. Jason Spezza was his number one guy. They didn't do their press conference talk together. Now we know why that's the case. Brendan Shanahan didn't want, he wasn't going to stop him, obviously, but didn't want Dubas to address the media before a deal was done. And I think it was very interesting to hear Brendan Shanahan's comments. I mean, you just don't see or hear that type of openness in hockey. So it's a little bit glaring when you do. I'm certainly not complaining, but for him to come out and give such a detailed timeline to how things happened, I mean, what I was left with that, and now we got to wait, right? Because there's always two sides to every story, and I'd be fascinated to hear what Dubas has to say about the whole thing. But it seemed like, early on, and when I say early on, I mean early on that week, before the media thing, it was like, okay, conversations were being had. It looked like he was certainly coming back. And then, days go by, he addresses things with the media. I thought it was pretty interesting. It's not all that surprising to hear, Kyle Dubas say about the impact on his family, and how much stress that would have been being the GM of the Leafs, and how much time and would have taken away from the family. I mean, that's certainly, I think that's pretty obvious. It was also equally interesting to hear kind of Shanahan talk about that being a little bit of his reasoning behind his change of opinion. I thought he hid behind this whole idea that Kyle Dubas, he at that moment, he needed to realize that Kyle Dubas may or may not be the Toronto Maple Leafs GM, or not want to be the Toronto Maple Leafs GM. Well, he got an email late Thursday that indicated he certainly wanted to be the GM. But the problem is the agent contacted Shanahan before with what I can only imagine was a contract that was way higher. Maybe not way, but certainly higher than the number that they were agreed on, or the ballpark in which MLSE wanted. And for Shanahan to wake up the next morning, drive down to his office and tell him with no uncertain words and no plan in place that he was not going to be the future of the Maple Leafs, while he was incredibly transparent, I can't help but to think there was some specifics in those emails or the asks or their conversations that turned things absolutely sour. And that's the truth that I want to hear. And I'm hoping Kyle Dubas is willing to share some of that tea, if you will.
Yeah, well, I guess the other thing is we're seeing reports today that part of the demands of Dubas was that, for all intents and purposes, Brendan Shanahan maybe no longer really with that hammer when it comes to hockey operations. And listen, all teams are done differently. I mean, there's a very short line of operation from ownership to the general manager here in Winnipeg. There are a few more cooks, and obviously at some point that can really complicate things. The thing is the most complicated, though, for Toronto. And I compare it to Winnipeg. I mean, Winnipeg, at least, we've got a pretty good idea about what the situation is. Dubois probably gone. You've got to make a decision on Scheifele that I think they're intimately familiar with the pros and cons to it. Hellebuck with 1 year left, a guy they would love to have here long term, but is that the best move for the club? And then obviously looking to try to find a taker for Blake Wheeler. Those are all pretty clear issues right now that they're working on. What Toronto, I don't think, was anticipating, certainly not by what we've seen, was having this happen now, not having a GM and having just over 1 month to get clarity on a franchise player in Austin Matthews, and we'll include Mitch Marner at that point as well, because both of them get full no-move clauses, which can take them right to free agency on the 1st of July with no ability for the Leafs to move on from them. This in some ways could end up being a bit of a game of chicken, and there's a number of people that have said that, with how close Dubas was with those players, and frankly, with how those players and their agents had their way with Dubas when they signed their contracts, in my opinion, what does that do to their willingness to stay part of this thing going forward, not knowing who the guy that's going to be calling the shots is? I mean, as fascinating as this next month or so is going to be for Winnipeg, I now put the Leafs right in that category as well, and it really could go a number of different ways.
Oh, and they'll have way more eyeballs on them. That's the worst part. I mean, to your point about Austin Matthews, it's a fascinating timeline because we're looking at 5 weeks before before July 1st, and so not only do you have to hire a new GM, okay, you then have to figure out who your head coach is. So is Sheldon Keefe sticking around? Probably not. I mean, he was a big Dubas guy. Obviously still has 1 year left in his contract, but the Leafs have been very clear that the new GM will be will be making the decision on the new head coach. So now you have to hire a GM. He needs to decide his, the future of Keefe, whether he stays or they hire somebody new. And then within that time, you then have to meet with Austin Matthews and convince him of your vision. So at the same time you're doing introductions, you're also laying out your plans and how you envision the future. And I mean, look, there have been reports from, insiders like Elliot Friedman and whatnot that, it was not a slam dunk that Austin Matthews was going to sign an extension or, within that time frame, even if Dubas was the GM, assuming Dubas still is the GM, in that scenario, maybe it gets done. I certainly would have a better feeling of it happening, but I don't know. I find sometimes we make too big a deal out of things. Like, does Austin Matthews need to think for months on months? You think he hasn't thought about his future already and where he wants to be? How much of that hinges on, team leadership? I'm sure that has a big thing to do with it. But I also feel like if you look at their exit interviews and listen to their exit interviews, and I'm sure Brendan Shanahan was doing this, they all seem like they were incredibly down to come back. They all want to be winners in Toronto, and they got a very, very small taste of it by winning that first round this season. But I think there's some unfinished business there. I don't know how many players want to leave Toronto after an era and be like, this is what we achieved. We got one series win in our core, and then we got bounced pretty early the next round. So, to me, I think maybe it's not a great thing to budget on or to bank on as leadership, but I do think there is some unfinished business there, and money talks, man. I mean, people want to be in Toronto. People, you either really, really don't want to be in Toronto or you really, really want to be. And so while I think there's certainly going to be change there, it's going to be a fascinating 5 weeks. We know that the Toronto Maple Leafs are looking for an experienced guy who can hit the ground running. They're not in a position to hire someone who lacks experience. They need somebody who can come in, and do the work right away, get to work right away, be comfortable with putting their fingerprints on this team. But it really is becoming more of a players say NHL. I mean, players haven't had more leverage ever than they do now. And so particularly when you hold those cards with trade clauses and all those other things, and certainly when you only have 1 year left on your deal, you're going to have to get some clarity from these guys. How much you're going to be able to get over the next month and a bit is going to be fascinating.
Bringing it a little closer to home, where's your heli meter this week right now? It's been interesting seeing, a number of people from outside the market writing on the possibility of Hellebuyck being moved, teams that make sense to potentially trade him before he's dealt anywhere. What do you make of where Winnipeg is right now? And as I say, your meter as to sign, trade, how all that works out. What are you hearing? What are you thinking about the Hellebuyck situation as we speak today?
Didn't LA clear a bunch of cap space, or looking to clear a bunch of cap space so they could get a guy like Connor Hellebuyck? I don't know. I mean, I'm still in the same camp. I think he's getting traded. I just don't think you can sell to Connor Hellebuyck that this is going to be a Stanley Cup contending team, well into the future, because that's what he'd be looking for. He'd be looking for a decent sized contract. Obviously, it'll be interesting to see what he gets, because we're moving away from not only an era of having a workhorse goalie. More teams often not have, I don't want to say necessarily a 1A, 1B per se, but more teams are moving in that direction to have a bit of a shared crease. And then because of all the work and all the games that Connor Hellebuyck has seen over his career, are you really ready to give a goalie? And this is the same. We're moving into another era. We're already there. You don't really sign goalies for 6, 7, 8 years anymore at max dollars. It just doesn't make any sense. There's far too much evidence against it. And so, that's all roundabout way of saying, what is the market for Connor Hellebuyck? Is he going to be, there's going to be teams that want him and his one remaining year, right? They could see the team that they have in front of them and feel that they're a goalie away from winning a Stanley Cup. And so they might throw, deals at the Winnipeg Jets. And then there's the teams that want him long-term. And again, it comes down to, how he feels. I think he likes Winnipeg. I do think he likes what they had here, but I also think he acknowledged in his exit interview that things are probably things aren't working here. That a lot of the individuals on this team, the star players, could have a lot of success individually on different markets, but don't seem to be able to make it click or make it happen as a current group with the Jets. And so to me, I would be absolutely shocked if Kevin Cheveldayoff wasn't already fielding calls, wasn't talking to teams. I don't think he's necessarily proactively saying Connor Hellebuyck is on the trade block. I don't think he has to. I think there's enough teams that can look at the situation, look at where he's at in his contract, look that he has 1 year left, and make their best pitch for him. I just, with all four of those guys that we've talked lots about, I see Connor Hellebuyck and Pierre-Luc Dubois as the two main guys that are going to be traded potentially, and I will go as far as to say probably before the draft. Where that leaves Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler, who knows? But I do think with Connor Hellebuyck, unless you can convince him, and I think that's going to be just too hard to do this summer, that this team is destined for better days, that they're going to be, because the thing is, he doesn't want to be a playoff team. He wants to be a contender. And I think it's pretty obvious at this point, with all the uncertainty going around this team and within the next 5 weeks, potential for massive change, I do not think they're going to get the players in return that are going to suggest that this team is, again, headed for better days.
Yeah, well, maybe not immediately. I think the plan would be that it's headed for better days, but probably by getting younger players, prospects that might take a little while. That's probably not on Hellebuyck's time frame, if you will. Assuming Pierre-Luc Dubois is traded, what percentage chance you think it is to the Montreal Canadiens, and then it's Habs, or everywhere else? What's the number on the Habs?
80%. 80-20, and even 20 seems high. I just think that they're looking to build things in Montreal. I think they're, obviously looking to build things like all the other 32 teams are doing. But I do think they, obviously like his, French background. I think there's an opportunity here for the Habs, and I don't know if we talked about this last week or not, but there's a lot of rumblings about them being interested in a guy like Alex Lafreniere, right? The guy, you talk about that guy in New York and needing a head coach to work with
every
him.
Good French guy. The Habs are rumored to be involved in.
Yeah. But look at if you have two young guys, because everyone's going, well, why would the Montreal Canadiens trade for him? Why wouldn't they wait? Well, guess what? Montreal's not a super patient hockey city. So this idea of waiting another year of crappy hockey is doable, but I don't think it's preferred. And so if you can get a guy, like a lot of the stuff around Alex Lafreniere right now is that he's, they need to find a coach in New York that can reach him, that can bring out the best in him. I'm not saying he's got, personality issues or anything like that. I just think he needs a coach to help him and guide him through. And Marty St. Louis is that guy. He would be the perfect fit for that. And then you look at Pierre-Luc Dubois, a young centerman. I think that would speed up your rebuild pretty darn quickly. So I do think there's an appetite there. There certainly has been an appetite there in the past. And while, we've seen that fall through, obviously, as he became a member of the Winnipeg Jets, I don't think that's off the table now, and I truly believe there's a very, very good chance that he's gone by the trade deadline, and Montreal would be at the very, very top of that list.
The trade deadline next year?
Sorry,
I'm talking about
the draft. My mistake. Yeah, draft.
Okay, yeah. To
deadline.
Me, that's something that
He's
needs
gone
to
by
get
the deadline
done.
for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, if he's not, and the only way that doesn't happen is if he signs an extension. And I think most people would agree that does not seem to be in the cards for Pierre-Luc Dubois here in Winnipeg. I mean, to me, I think this is a staring match right now. And Kevin Cheveldayoff has said this is what we are willing to trade Pierre-Luc Dubois for. And it's quite clear that the Montreal Canadiens either haven't wanted or haven't felt that they have needed to pay that price. And really what is going to determine, I think, the return for the Winnipeg Jets on a Dubois deal is whether they can get another team or two interested in potentially acquiring him for a year, or finding out that maybe Dubois has another team or two that he might be interested. I keep on thinking about the possibility of him going to the Boston Bruins. The Bruins are going to, in all likelihood, need two centers to replace Patrice Bergeron and Krejci. And for a young French guy like Dubois, even if he grew up loving the Habs, I can't imagine that that Bergeron isn't one of the guys that he really looks up to. And to follow in his footsteps in a great sports market like that, on a team that was the best in the National Hockey League last year, I don't think it's unreasonable to think that that's a situation that he might want to stick around in a little bit longer. And when you think about the Habs maybe procrastinating getting this deal done, and all of a sudden having a team like Boston in the mix, where if all of a sudden he stays and then you're dealing with him 6-7 times a year for the next however many years, that would be a beautiful, beautiful outcome from a Jets standpoint right now, if you feel that you're sort of being held hostage by the Montreal Canadiens. But LA, I mean, there's some other teams that need center help and depth that I think would have the possibility of keeping him around.
Would take a young centerman in his early 20s, right? Especially one with, and I know there was some, look, as unique of a game that Pierre-Luc Dubois has, he certainly is your modern day power forward, right? He's the kind of guy and I use Adam Lowry as an example not because I think they're in the same tier whatsoever, but he's the kind of guy that if he's not scoring points, he can do something else to have a positive impact on the game. The Jets have far too many players, a la Kyle Connor, a la Mark Scheifele, a la Nikolai Ehlers, that if they're not scoring points, they're really not impacting the game on a positive, they're not getting super physical. They're not doing other elements of the game that bring a positive outcome to your team. And so, but I think what's interesting about Pierre-Luc Dubois, and I don't think it's been talked about a lot, is I'm curious, and this happens when it comes to trades and needling for the best deal or whatever. I'm very curious about the health of Pierre-Luc Dubois. And how it stands, and because when you get these trades, because there's physicals, right, in the summer, in the off season, a lot of the trades, I'd be curious to know what the results of a Pierre-Luc Dubois physical would be. We know he has some hip issues, some hip injuries, and I'm not saying that would be enough for, say, a Montreal Canadiens to not want to complete a trade, but it might be enough for them to be like, look, he's banged up, he's injured, we want a different deal for it. I mean, we're talking speculative here, obviously, with deals and stuff, but I do think that his health status is an important one. It's a particularly important one for teams who want him for a year. Because if he, Pierre-Luc Dubois, you could go as far as say he barely practiced last year. He had a lot of maintenance days, right? I mean, he had a lot of, even in the playoffs, he wasn't, he wasn't out for regular practices. He missed morning skates because of this lingering hip issue. And so just how serious is that hip issue? How much is it going to affect him next season? Those are the questions I would certainly be asking if I was a team outside of the Montreal Alouettes and was looking for him as, if you're the Boston Bruins, as you say, Huss, if you want him for 1 year or you feel like you can only get him for 1 year, what's that year going to look like? So lots of questions up in the air, but certainly we're going to get some answers here. And hopefully sooner than later, hopefully within the next month.
Yeah, I still do wonder what other listen, I think GMs realize, and if you've got a good veteran coach in a good room that you can kind of bring him in, and I would almost say the same thing about Scheifele. I mean, to come in, you're not leaning on him to be the guy, but a guy that can play at a very important role, that can do the things he does well, but have the culture dictated by other players in the room. I think that's the perfect scenario for him because, I mean, if
For
I'm a
Pierre-Luc
GM,
Dubois?
yeah.
Interesting.
Well, listen,
I would have said that about another
Mhm.
high-end Jets center. I don't know if I would say that about Pierre-Luc Dubois.
Well, Scheif, that's what I said. I said I'd almost say I said both of those, but I mean, I started with Dubois, and part of the reason is that if you're like, I just still can't get over how different Pierre-Luc Dubois looked in game 1 of the series against Vegas, where he looked like the most dominant player, like the guy that the Jets traded for, the best case scenario of him, and a guy that, well, I saw his jersey out there, but I'm still stunned that was the same player wearing that jersey in game number 5 when you would have thought that this team was playing for their lives. I mean, it's hard to wrap your head around that from someone that watches every single game. And I guess if I'm a GM, listen, he does a lot of things well. I think that his consistency is not where it needs to be for a guy that you're going to hang your hat as he's going to be your guy going forward. And I mean, there are some similarities to me between those two players, as different of players as they are.
Oh, for sure. And the only difference, I was kind of going on a point about the knocks against Pierre-Luc Dubois. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, his, the shift in Columbus, I not quite put it up there with that, but there was a couple shifts in game 5 that, Pierre-Luc Dubois, as you mentioned, did not help his cause for being a committed guy. But I look at that and it's hard to say what was affecting him by game 5 of that series, right? I mean, again, he's had a lingering issue. He didn't practice, in Vegas that leading up to that week. Didn't really practice all playoffs. Didn't go, was not there for the morning skate. I mean, this was a guy who was clearly nursing something. So maybe that played a role in all of it. But I certainly look at Pierre-Luc Dubois' tenure in Winnipeg, and I see far more examples of a guy who gives a crap than a guy who doesn't. And obviously, of course, you want that to be heavily favored in the give a crap part than the not. But I did see, in that entire year where the Winnipeg Jets were just, a disaster, where they missed the playoffs by 10 points, the one consistent guy night in and night out was Pierre-Luc Dubois. And so, and to your point about, I think a guy like Mark Scheifele would benefit from being behind the scenes, like, being a quieter part of a leadership group that didn't involve having him wear a letter. Because I think I really do think, like we talked about Blake Wheeler and the burden of having the C. I mean, there's a burden on Mark Scheifele being an A. He clearly is not interested in, being accountable through the media to the fans. He doesn't like doing media much at all. Certainly has some issues with coaches and stuff like that, and is probably not the greatest example for his teammates on how to conduct himself. But he's a terrific hockey player that if you put him in the right culture in the right circumstance could probably flourish. He already proved he's a 40-goal scorer this past season. He's been a point per game guy for the seasons prior to that for the most part. So he's got a lot of upside to him. It's just, how do you put him in the right scenery? And the reality is that Mark wasn't like this the entire time in Winnipeg. This is, it's obviously weighed on him as being a Jet. And I think he would really benefit from a change of scenery. I don't see it as much for Pierre-Luc Dubois, but the problem is Pierre-Luc Dubois, I think, wants different, right? I think he wants to be in a bigger market. I think he wants to be in a city that he can explore, with his partner over the weekends and get into all the other hobbies and interests that he's in. If that's not Montreal, that's somewhere else. And so there's a couple different reasons for why these guys would benefit in other places. They just aren't necessarily all aligned.
Hey, Jeff, before we go, the one thing that honestly has been probably our biggest topic last year that hasn't changed much, but is on the back burner when we're talking about your top 2 centers and your franchise goalie, is the blue line. What do you think the future is for Logan Stanley, Ville Heinola, and Declan Chisholm with the Winnipeg Jets as it pertains to next season?
It's an interesting question. If we go based on what we saw last year, I don't know. And I know those people who love Ville Heinola. It's not my decision. It's not my say. It's not like, but it just doesn't look like he's in the top 6 or 7 depth chart. And until they move a guy like Logan Stanley, who, clearly asked for a trade last year, he doesn't see himself in the mix. He doesn't view himself as a 7th defenseman who's getting in and out of the lineup. But we've also seen the Winnipeg Jets be reluctant to give guys their wishes, their trade requests, right? If it doesn't benefit them. And the reality is that, I get emails all the time being like, what could the Winnipeg Jets get for Logan Stanley? Clearly not that much, or clearly not to the, to the benefit of the Winnipeg Jets, or at least not to what Kevin Cheveldayoff thinks, because it's not like they haven't tried. He's been the guy that, has been a sprinkle in on potential deals, stuff like that, but they just haven't panned out. The value of his is not super high, and whether the Jets are just unwilling to accept, moving on from a guy they drafted and traded up for in the first round, this organization isn't exactly one to admit its faults, clearly. So maybe that's kind of keeping it up. I really do see a situation that if they cannot deal a guy like Nate Schmidt, and I know a lot of people want Nate Schmidt gone. He's got what, 2 or 3 more years left on his deal. That's pretty expensive price tag for him. Maybe a team would want him, but they certainly would not probably swallow the entire contract. So the Jets, we've seen in the past, have had, been adverse to, paying for players that aren't on their lineup to swallow any of that money. That will depend, but barring an opening, I could easily see a Declan Chisholm and a Logan Stanley sharing the 7th defensive spot. That might not be ideal, but I don't think you can have those two guys in your top 7, because the last thing you need is to have a Johnny Kovacevic situation happen again, where you're just giving away a guy for nothing. So we'll see what happens. That was the big thing, or the number one item on the to-do list last summer. Unfortunately for the Winnipeg Jets, while still a very important piece of their business this summer, doesn't fall really within the top 5, or if it is, it's the fifth number 5 after figuring out those 4 players we've been talking about. So that would be my guess, but who knows? I think at this point in time, the Winnipeg Jets need to find a new home for Ville Heinola. If he's not in your future plans, you need to deal with him. Problem is, they've essentially decimated his value. No one's going to be giving top dollar for a guy who the Winnipeg Jets can't seem to get in on their blue line. So we'll see. But I really do think Ville Heinola is most likely gone. Logan Stanley as well, if they can find a deal. But outside of that, I think you have to give Chisholm an opportunity with the team next year. And if Logan Stanley's still with the team, going to have to probably share duties with him.
Well, and I mean, listen, even if you take Stanley out of the mix and say that he's moved at the draft or whatever, even with Stanley not there, Dylan Samberg needs a contract. He's a restricted free agent. And then you've got Morrissey, Schmidt, Pionk, Dylan, DeMello, and Capobianco signed for next year. So there's 7 defensemen right there. I mean, even if you trade Stanley, there's not the room right now for both of those guys who will be exposed to waivers if they get dropped on it. And that is definitely not the way I think the Winnipeg Jets want to go about it, especially as you brought up, considering what happened with Johnny Kovacevic last year. Well, I'll tell you what, no shortage of interesting topics for us to kick around. It is slow right now, and we have not heard much. And listen, that is part of the way things work with the Winnipeg Jets. There's not a lot that comes out until there's a reason for it to come out. But do you think we'll be in this holding pattern for the next few weeks? Or just with the amount of work that needs to happen, might we see some moves well in advance of the draft, or at least one to get things going, say earlier in June? Or are we expecting a flurry of activity, whatever they can get done in and around gathering in Nashville?
Yeah, I'd say the NHL is not a huge fan of taking away attention from the Stanley Cup Finals. And so you might have
a week off with no hockey, actually, depending on what happens in the next 2 days.
So, but I think so maybe that does play. I mean, I'm not saying teams are banning trades during the Stanley Cup playoffs, but they do like to have the attention focused on the Stanley Cup playoffs and not elsewhere. I do think Pierre-Luc Dubois I don't think it's a draft floor thing, whether it's days before, weeks before. I think he's probably the first one gone. Because you also need, because think about it, right? If you've already had conversations with Connor Hellebuck and he doesn't want to be back he doesn't want to be signing long term, then you're doing deals. If the conversation is, well, I'd like to wait about my future, I'd like to figure this out, I'd like to see what direction this team is headed. Well, depending on what you get for Pierre-Luc Dubois, could determine exactly where Connor Hellebuck's head's at. So maybe he's waiting for a chip to fall, or players are all waiting for chips to fall. It's going to impact each deal, that happens here with a key player is going to impact the opinion of the next key player who's up. And so, I really do think Pierre-Luc Dubois is number one on that list. I could see his trade being done shortly after the Stanley Cup playoffs, shortly before the end of the Stanley Cup playoffs, and certainly before trade deadline. That's my one. Or sorry, I keep saying trade deadline, but what I mean is the draft. I could easily see him being done well in advance of the draft because they got so many other pieces they need to take care of too.
No, exactly. It'll be very busy, and there's a lot of things on that to-do list for the Winnipeg Jets general manager. Hammer, awesome stuff. Next Monday, if you get any great treasures when you're hitting the waters, I'd like you to maybe show off something from whatever you pick up next week on your visit. That could be something fun we can do after the weekends when you join us early in the week.
Yeah, let's maybe do it when Scooch isn't bringing you behind the scenes to the Hockey Hall of Fame. It just feels like a little bit underwhelming. I know people are excited about my garage sale adventures, but just something tells me that giving them a sneak peek behind the overflow, if you will, of the Hockey Hall of Fame versus Jeff's junk, I call it, over the weekends might not be aligned, but certainly appreciate being on. We will do that moving down the
I'm going to tag along with you one of these days. We'll get some good. That's a great content opportunity, to be honest with you. Huss and Hammer, with that Jeff's junk hitting the waters with Huss and Hammer. Right?
Right on.
Makes a lot of sense. We got to make it happen. Have a great one, man. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks, Ryan. Take care, my man.
Good stuff. There is Jeff Hamilton. Give him a follow on Twitter at Jeff K. Hamilton. You can check out all of his work over in the pages of the Winnipeg Free Press. Well, we did hit Bombers. Of course, training camp continues. We've got preseason action coming up. CFL preseason actually began yesterday with the Elks and Stamps going at it. Of course, we're ready for Bomber season, and we're ready for those Princess Auto tailgate parties before each and every game at IG Field. Princess Auto, proud sponsors of the Bombers and WST, and the place where you'll find the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. Panet Road, Portage Avenue West. There's the 2 Winnipeg locations. You can also shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. Shout out to our friends over at Consolidated Supply, the leaders in irrigation systems, artificial turf, and golf carts, both new and used, as the exclusive club car dealer in Manitoba. Not to mention other great options for your property, including hot tubs and amazing outdoor kitchens. Not to mention small engine parts and repair. Consolidated Supply has you covered in so many different ways. Pop by and see them at their new showroom, open to the public at 1395 Niagara Road East, or find out more online at cte.ca. And by the way, shout out to Joe at Consolidated Supply, because he sent me an email. He's going to be firing off some Bomber home opener tickets that will be plopping in the marble race either this week or next week. So be sure to join us on Friday afternoons for that. Royal Sports is busy right now, man. There is so much new stock coming in for spring, for soccer, softball, baseball, tennis, tons of bikes, and of course, the most shoes you will find anywhere, especially with some of the world famous tent sales. They'll have a couple more coming up this summer. We'll tell you about those. But in the meantime, whether you're looking to get out and make the most of spring and summer, or just get that latest piece of merch for your favorite team, Royal Sports is the place to do it at. 750 Pembina Highway is the Royal Sports Superstore. And follow them on Instagram at Royal Sports Pembina for the latest merchandise drops and sale information. And a big shout out to our friends at Boston Pizza. Still time to jump on that Fanalytics menu that's featured right now at BP, including those deep fried pickle spears and the new triple play combo. You can also, of course, enjoy ice cold schooners, world famous Boston wings, and gourmet pizzas and pizza flights. And the latest from the BP feature menu. And hey, if you're staying at home, you can always order in and get the great taste of Boston Pizza online at bostonpizza.com. All right, we still have got a bunch of things to do. We got horse picks to go, and but let's get Remis back in here. Man, Man, a couple great guests to start off a short week with Scooch at the Hockey Hall of Fame. And, man, we really hit for the cycle with Hammer, hitting a whole bunch of great topics. People seem to really enjoy it, as they always do when Jeff and Joe join us.
Yeah, first of all, Joe at the Hockey Hall of Fame, the chat totally lit up there when he went to the room with all the sticks. And he showed me before, because we were testing to see if the internet worked, and he showed me what they have some hockey cards back there, like categorized photos. That was very cool, and I know a lot of people enjoyed. If you're listening on the podcast, come on the YouTube to watch Joe Pascucci's VHS players, VCRs behind him, all the old equipment to do that digitizing. So that was awesome. And yeah, number of topics with Jeff, Bombers, Leafs, Jets, Winnipeg Ice as well. A lot of intrigue. What happens with them next season? I mean, it's crazy to think that they are playing in a 2,000-seat arena, and you have the Quebec Ramparts, who just won their league championship. They're playing in front of 18,000 at the Videotron Center. I mean, I know the different leagues, one's the Q, one's the Dub, but I mean, still, I don't know what you do with the Ice here going forward, but they did have a fantastic season, and we'll have to see if anything happens there with them for next season. As far as the Jets, I know I'm going to the buffet. I do, I like the topics on the defense because we haven't really touched on that. And last year, all summer, we said they got to trade a D for some forward depth. They did not do that and lost Johnny Kovacevic, who played a great role. He played a role with Montreal in their starting lineup. But he wondered, does something happen with Logan Stanley and Ville Heinola? Murat wrote in The Athletic over the weekend answering his mailbag, saying that, he said, Heinola politely asked to be played in the NHL or moved more than once over the last couple seasons. And we know Logan Stanley requested a trade as well. That was reported. So you wonder what happens with those guys. How do they make room for them? They have all these veterans in there with big contracts.
Was the same way. And, basically said he ripped his ass open for the team. I believe that was the headline that we saw it from the German newspaper. And listen, I know a lot of people sometimes, depending on what their angle is, if they're trying to make the team look bad or say they've mismanagement, how could they do that to those guys? Folks, listen, I worked long enough in the American Hockey League to know that go to every single team in the National Hockey League and go to their American League affiliate, and there's 2 or 3 guys that think that they should be playing in the National Hockey League, and they're not getting a chance. That's just the way things work. However, at a certain point, you need to make decisions on these players. And I think the Jets are going to be forced into those decisions coming up when it comes to Heinola and certainly Declan Chisholm. And from a Jets perspective, I'm not sure that they felt that Leon Gavanka is an NHL player. And listen, I know enough people that spend a lot of time watching the American Hockey League and thinks that Gavanka, is definitely a very, very good AHL player. Not sure that he translates into the NHL. Now, if he gets his chance somewhere and makes the most of it, he'll have an opportunity at some point to make people that didn't believe in him look bad. But as of right now, he's just been too far down on the ladder. And listen, Johnny Kovacevic was a similar way. A very important player on the Manitoba Moose, but a guy that I think when the Jets were looking at their top defense prospects, didn't think that he was right there. And listen, if they knew they were going to put on waivers and get picked up for nothing, I'm sure there would have been some sort of an attempt to get some sort of asset back, and that didn't happen. So, asset management is what it comes down to, and there's a ton of very interesting asset management conversations we'll have when it comes to the players within the team right now, and of course, so much of that also to do with potential trades of those members of the Winnipeg Jets. Hey, I got to do a quick golf report for our friends at Breezy. Breezy Ben, of course, Breezy looking great right now. Shout out to Craig and the staff there for getting it ready to go so early in the season. It's just looking absolutely fantastic. If you're thinking about getting on the waiting list for next year to make it a long-term home for you and your golfing family, go to breezyben.ca or give up pal Corey Johnson a call for more information on that as they're packed for this year. But man, what a weekend at Oak Hill for the PGA championship. And the big game hunter, Remis, Brooks Koepka back on top, wins his 3rd PGA and 5th major. And, of course, a big day for the Live gang as I know Cameron Smith is the defending Open championship, but he wasn't with Live when he did it. This is the first active Live golfer to win a major championship. And there was Brooks looking pretty wired, if you will, at the Panther game last night. And Brady Tkachuk crushing beers in the Wanamaker Trophy. If the Panthers win the Cup, I know Brady won't be drinking out of it for his brother, but he was more than happy on crushing a few out of the Wanamaker yesterday down in South Florida.
Yeah, a couple of things. One, that was the talk of the PGA Tour coming in. Would any of these Live guys who are playing in these, like, I don't know, these like beer league equivalent tournaments, be able to, pick up their game for the majors on the PGA Tour? And the answer is yes, with Brooks Koepka taking down the PGA Championship. And he wasn't at the Panthers game. He was at the Peas game, Huss. I don't know if you saw that interview
that's right. Sorry.
where he said he was going to watch the Peas. I think that's the first time anyone has ever called the Panthers the Peas.
Dustin Nielsen said the exact same thing to me today on the Lock Shop. Have you ever heard anyone refer to the Panthers as the Peas?
No.
Just Brooks.
And there he was in the reverse retro Panthers jersey, which I think is better than the Panthers jerseys. I'll be honest, like, suck. Like, if they make the Stanley Cup playoffs, they got to go back. Stanley Cup final, they got to go back to the '96 jerseys and bring, because I think they're
Brooks was wearing a '96. Was that a Van Beesbrook or just a Panthers '94 jersey?
I think it's Lomberg or something. Isn't that who it is? No, that's this year's reverse retro Panthers jersey.
Oh, isn't the reverse retro is the one with the stick and the palm tree, and it's like a lighter blue?
I think it was the first reverse retro.
Oh, okay. Because it looks like the OG blue,
and that's
Panthers
way
jersey.
better. That's way better than the one they have now. That's my opinion as a jersey connoisseur.
Only real fans call them the Peas. By the way, the connection between Koepka and the Panthers is pretty hilarious. And I don't have a date on this, but you will recall when Brooks got all liquored up with his buddies in a suite at a Panthers game a couple months ago, and he was yelling at Ekblad and holding up a pylon, calling him a traffic cone. You are a pylon, basically getting all over Ekblad. And of course, then people took videos of it and put it all over social media. He apologized afterwards. They've worked things out. But if you actually go back to that moment, the Koepka Ekblad traffic cone incident, I think since then, the Panthers have been on an absolute tear, which they had to do just to get into the playoffs. And since then, Brooks is second in the Masters and has won the PGA. That could be the turning point for both of them this year.
Crazy. And the other thing, too, was Brady Tkachuk, sorry to keep going on this, but, coming in the series, I was like, look, last time we saw Brady wearing a Flames shirt, double fisting beers in the stands, he was pretty subdued yesterday in the box there.
And he said he's not doing it because they're both in the East now.
Oh, I mean, it is a weird look, and I think that makes sense. But he did slam back from the what's it called? What's the
Wanamaker?
I get
the Wanamaker trophy,
not the claret jug. That's a different one. So there you go. Anytime any trophy that's great for a holding liquid, you got to drink out of it.
Yeah, well, for sure, and that's a big one. I think he went on Pardon My Take after he won, and I think that thing can hold like 15 or 16 beers. I mean, it is. It's big. It's got a lot of volume to it. Well, we'll have some time to. The off season is here, of course, and we're gonna have to do a fishing segment at some point, maybe with Pitt at one point. Bottom line is, if you're thinking about getting out on the water at some point this year in a world-class facility with even better world-class hospitality and fishing, Aikens Lake is the place to do it. Check out more online at aikenslake.com and learn about the one-of-a-kind Aikens experience. They do have limited availabilities for trips this year. And, of course, already booking into next year. Give our pal Pitt Turen a buzz. Find out more about what Aikens Lake is all about. I can't wait to get there a little later on this summer, and we will certainly let you know about it on our WST channels. Speaking of summertime, Remo, I made it to the Goldeyes on the weekend, and, man, it was great to be back at the ballpark. Awesome crowd on Friday night for the home opener. I think it was well over 5,000. And, you can really tell about a big, big crowd by the lines at all of the concessions. Craft beer corner was absolutely packed. All of the bars had long lines, and maybe the best gig in the building on Friday was the beer man, because they basically just got their racks. They'd stand up at the start and bang, they'd be done and they'd be filling it up again. Business was very, very brisk at food and beverage at Shaw Park, and a great win to start the season. It did lose yesterday to avoid completing the full sweep, or sorry, I guess that would be Sunday, but they're right back at it, beginning another series tonight. And I'm not sure whether I'll get there tonight. Might go to the track tonight and then head out there in the next couple days. But, oh, yes, you've got the post. And I have done some ballpark food intel for the viewers. Listen, if you're listening on the podcast, you're going to have to check out either my Insta or the Sports Talk WPG Instagram page. This, what we're looking at, go back to the first one there for a sec, Remo. This is the barbecue bowl, which it's unbelievable. It starts mashed potatoes in the middle. There's beans, there's sausage, there's brisket, coleslaw, all together in one very easy to eat event. The other thing we tried was the triple play combo. Now, this one, you've got your choice of two sides, went with mac and cheese and coleslaw, full sausage, which was really good. And then there's pulled pork and brisket in there. Other things that are back, the butter chicken from Clay Oven, I can confirm is amazing. But one of the things that I was the most fired up about, one of my all-time favorites, is Sal's. Now, Sal's was in the building last year, Reem, but it was just their kickin' chicken menu. Well, good news. They've got a bigger, better booth this year. The chicken is back, but also nips and chips. One of my associates had a nip, and they said it was maybe the best thing they ate all weekend.
Nips and chips. Sounds delightful.
That's what it says right there. The nips and chips menu on the back. I, in fact, just got an email from Sal's about that. But they're there. Pierogies are back. Goldie Dogs are back. I did not see anybody eat the Grand Slamwich, the $60 monster that's on a loaf of garlic bread. I don't know, maybe they were just too busy for it, or I didn't see it, but we will be doing some intel at some point on that. And that, again, another big content opportunity for our TikTok channel and our YouTube.
Yeah, we should try to take that down. Maybe we'll have to make that one members only, Hustler, because I don't know if I want that out there.
Paywall.
Me eating the Grand Slamwich, but great to see people back at the ballpark for the weather. Didn't hurt them at all. And I know it was a tough, couple seasons with the pandemic, playing like, the 1 year on the road, the other year, in their own different state. So they're back, new manager as well this year, Greg Taggart, first year. So the Gold Eyes, it feels like a rebirth here with the new logo too. And nice to see you getting some barbecue. That's because I don't think there's too many barbecue places here in Winnipeg. So I will have to try that one. That bowl looks tasty.
It was so good. It was so good. And everything was great. And the other thing that I had a few of and is available now at the ballpark is the new Little Brown Jug generic lager. I mean, we told you about it on the show. We tried it for the first time at the sports trivia event about a month ago or so. Basic lager, just better. Award-winning now after those beer awards last week. But it's a light and clean to taste. It's basically a local version of some of your more standard domestic beers. There it is, enjoying it at the ballpark right now, and definitely suggest you get down to the tap room. By the way, they've got that new menu as well, with a bunch of varieties of grilled cheese sandwiches they're doing up at Little Brown Jug, which is a nice addition. But I highly recommend the generic, and if you haven't had it, try it at your next Winnipeg Gold Eyes game. And of course, you can find out more online at littlebrownjug.ca if you want to order for delivery. And speaking of cheers, and I'll hoist one for this guy. We just talked about Brooks, and Brooks, of course, was the headliner winning the PGA Championship, Reem. But I'm sure even you, not a big golf guy, paid attention to the incredible story of this Michael Block dude who really stole the show at the PGA Championship as a 47-year-old teaching professional.
Absolutely insane that you can go to the PGA, qualify, and finished that well. And I'm talking to you. It sounds like his schedule is pretty booked up. Not going to have too much time for lessons over the next month or so.
Yeah, well, he's made enough money that he can miss a few of his $150 an hour lessons because he won $288,000 by finishing in the top 15. And if people missed it, on Thursday after the show, I was watching round one, and they had this guy on a live on-course interview with Scott Van Pelt. And it was interesting. And I think that, just to back it up a bit, the PGA Championship has 20 PGA professionals, like not PGA Tour pros, but teaching pros at clubs. And they all qualify, and the best 20 make it into the event. So it's obviously a career highlight just to be good enough of the teaching of the pros just to make it in that event. Very rarely do they make the cut or anything like that. And he said in this interview that, the one thing that he'd never done was, make the cut and being the top teaching pro, where much like the Masters, they honor the top amateur and then the champion. They do the same thing with the best club professional. Well, he was so comfortable after that interview and made a couple great shots afterwards, shot even par again, making the cut, would beat John Rahm by 6 strokes and a whole number of the top pros in the world. Saturday goes even par again and is paired in the final round with Rory McIlroy. And again, part of a fairy tale story that, you can't even make up. He then jars his tee shot for a slam dunk hole-in-one on the 15th hole, Remo. Certainly the iconic moment of the entire tournament, and ended up finishing tied for 15th, enough to automatically qualify him for the PGA next year. And since then, he got a call afterwards inviting him on a sponsor's invitation to the Colonial. He accepted. And I saw just earlier today the RBC Canadian Open announcing that the block party is coming north of the border, and he will be also on a sponsor's exemption at the RBC Canadian Open. Real life tin cup. Michael Block, which is certainly one of the great stories of the entire weekend.
The block party. I like that. Is this like golf's equivalent, Huss, of the e-bug coming in? And
well, that's if the e-bug, went on a run and got to keep playing, I guess.
Yeah. That's pretty awesome. So I think that's the story we'll be watching. And good for him going on all the shows, doing all the interviews, taking advantage of your, I don't want to say 15 minutes because he's going on for a while, but that's a pretty cool story, Huss.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Speaking of cool stories, bringing it back to Winnipeg, and we'll talk more about this over the next couple days, but hearing great things about this crowd for the Sea Bears coming up on Saturday. Of course, and by the way, Chad Posthumus and some of the fellas from our new professional hoops team were actually at the Gold Eyes home opener on Friday night. Seem to be pretty excited for the upcoming season. And
really easy to pick out.
Saturday,
guys?
Chad was. I can tell you that much. He's sort of, you can just look at fans, and then one guy here, and everybody else. But yeah, they were well represented at the game. But I think Winnipeg is going to be well represented. Apparently, the initial allotment of tickets that they put on sale have sold out. They've opened up more seats for the game, and new seats are added. I know we're going to plan to get down there for what should be a bit of a historic night at Canada Life Centre for the new CEBL. And I'm hoping to get Kirby Shep on at some point if he's in town this week to get his thoughts on the new league and some of the players in it. The other guy we're going to have to reach out before the weekend, though, is a WST favorite, Reem. And that, of course, is our guy Mo Khan, because Mo calls CEBL games out in Quebec, has been working with the league for the last couple years. I think he'd be a perfect guy to sort of, educate all of us on this new league that the Winnipeg team is playing in, and begins, of course, on Saturday night.
Yeah, it's starting up, and they put out the release that they sold out their initial allotment of seats. We did have the coach, Mike Taylor, on last week saying they're going to set a league attendance record in the first game. So there is excitement, and you hope they can continue the momentum. And, you spoke about, how, their presence at with the U of M, U of W game. That was a crazy atmosphere. And I think this might work here, Hessler, with Seabreeze. I know there's a lot of sports teams, but we don't have basketball, and I really like what they're doing. There's a number of leagues and across Europe and throughout the world. Why can't Canada have their own league? And they're bringing in some quality players, local players as well, like Chad Posthumus. I think this is pretty cool, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the CEBL is all about. And they're even going to have games, a small number of games on TSN, which is pretty cool. Yep. So they're going to have a presence there. So I think this is awesome, and I'm fired up for the Seabirds. Training camp is underway, and we're going to keep an eye on Sean Marinan from the Westman, who we had on the show, how he does it at the training camp. Not sure what's going to happen there, but cool. They're giving these local guys an opportunity.
Well, and the great thing is the U of W coach is the assistant with Mike Taylor. So, I mean, he'll know what Sean can do. And again, obviously a couple of Kirby's guys as well from the U of M, including Simon Hildebrand, who was the #1 overall pick in the draft, also playing for the Seabears this year. So get your tickets if you haven't already. Saturday night, Canada Life Center, game #1 of the new era of professional basketball here in the Peg. All right, let's get over to the Coolbet lines. We got a game tonight. Can the Dallas Stars get back into this series, Michael Remis? We've seen a sweep for the Denver Nuggets. We've seen the Heat up 3-0 on the Celtics. The Panthers up 3-0. I mean, this has been despite all the overtime, somewhat anticlimactic and lopsided conference final series. Will the Dallas Stars be the first team down to actually win a game in either the NBA or NHL conference finals tonight?
Yeah, they had the lead last game. They have the goalie. Anyone can do it. I'm going with Dallas here. We need to have some close series. We can't have two series where you're up 3-0, and I don't think anyone wants to see Vegas here keep doing it. So I'm going with Dallas. They're at home. They have the better goalie. I don't know. They couldn't close it out for the last 3 minutes and then lost it.
People would rather have Dallas or Vegas win?
Dallas. Who's people? Define people.
Winnipeg, people from Winnipeg, Jet fans.
Oh, I guess there's so much Manitoba content.
Yeah, do we really want a division rival to roll to the Cup?
I think people. Well, okay, wait. Does Gary Lawless get a day with the Cup? Because maybe I should start cheering for that. And I'll probably have to angle for an invite to his Cup party in Matlog. But
Winnipeg Beach. Wouldn't that be something? No, I listen. I think that I know there's some people that don't like Vegas because, well, first of all, they beat the Jets. But I got nothing but respect for that team, all the Manitoba players and staff on it. And I don't know, it would drive me nuts, I think, to see the Dallas Stars go all the way to the Cup final, considering how close the Jets were in that division with all those other teams.
That's true. I just think people don't want to see Vegas in the Cup. You go through some pain. You can't just get a franchise and make 4 conference finals in 6 years. It doesn't work like that. They need some heartbreak before they can win a Stanley Cup. It's too easy for them. What, they think they're going to be in the playoffs every year? Sorry. No. You don't get a franchise on easy mode. So I'm going for Dallas.
You get what you pay for.
Yeah.
Stars -144 on the money line. Vegas +122. I'm actually going to hit the over in this one. Over 5.5. Basically even money. -102 on the over tonight. Under 5.5. Tomorrow, Panthers -113 favorites to finish up and beat the Carolina Hurricanes, who just cannot score a goal, or beat Sergei Bobrovsky. NBA playoffs, Nuggets swept the Lakers. Bye-bye, LeBron. And tonight, will it be Jimmy Buckets and the Miami Heat sweeping the Boston Celtics as an 8 seed? Crazy things happening in South Florida right now between the Panthers and the Heat. Both up 3-0 in their series, 1 win away from getting to the championship. Heat -116. Celtics -101. Celtics look done. Lock in the Miami Heat. That's our pick. Oh, and we do have an exclusive today. Lock Shop Partner Parlay. We've got the Dallas Stars to win, the Miami Heat to win, and we've added in the Houston Astros, who are on a 7 or 8 game heater. They're in Milwaukee to take on the Brewers. +505. I think it was originally +510. The odds have gone down slightly, but still better than 5-1. If you like that one, get it at the Coolbet exclusives under lock shop partner parlay. All right. Hey, before we go, Reem, I can't believe, folks, and listen, people that watched last year during the summer, we've got a fun head-to-head betting challenge for the races, live racing at Assiniboia Downs. So last night, we didn't have a show, of course, but it was opening night, so we both put our picks in. I did not even start my picks until race 3 or race 4. I get a text from Remis announcing that he's already cashed a $60 winner on the first race of the series. So I'm literally playing catch up before I even got to cash a ticket. But quite a start for you last night at the track.
I'm so fired up. Yeah. You reminded me. I was like napping on the couch, like, hey, we got to get our picks in. And yes, I had a $5 exacta, horse 1 and horse 2 on race 2 yesterday. That's someone else and Tapiture Way finished 1 and 2, and it paid me $60. So I'm up. I was up 40 yesterday, and you were down 12. We're betting $20 each live race day. So I'm up like $50 on you in day 1. But it is a long summer. I mean, there were some months last year I was hot. I got off to a really slow start last year and really was playing catch up all year. So I'm looking forward to continuing this heater tonight as live racing has returned to the Downs.
It certainly has. All right, I'm going to give you my picks right now. I've got them locked and loaded, ready to go. Starting off in race number 2, I'm putting $4 on number 5 to win. That is Call the Cops, one of our favorites from last year. Call the Cops in race number 2. In race number 3, there is one clear-cut favorite, and that is Chicago's Gray. So I'm doing a triactor box, but with 6 to win, and then 1-3-4, 1-3-4. So Pioneer Town, Canadian Authority, or Party at My Place in any orders for 2nd and 3rd, but number 6 has to win. Then I've got the exacta box. This is basically a Quinella, $2 Quinella. It's a $1 each way exacta with 4 and 7 in race number 5. Those horses are Hard West and Ethan's Animal. In race number 6, we've got the 5 horse to win, and that is our favorite from last year, Shooting Money.
I love Shooting Money.
No doubt. And then I always do a triactor usually on the final race. Triactor box or triactor wheel, whatever you want to call it, $1, so it's $6 bet. Any order. 4, Ensley's Dream. 5, Gianna's Wildcat. And number 7, French Rose. What are you cooking up for tonight?
Okay, everyone in chat asking about our favorite horse from last year, Hot Linda. I don't know if Hot Linda's back, but
Hot Linda hasn't been on the first 2 cards, but we will definitely be discussing Hot Linda. Great memories, everyone.
Yeah, I just love looking at the names. I do have a triactor with Call the Cops on race 2. I also have, who do I have? I got 3, 5, and 6. Barely Regal and Crowned Royal. So finish 1, 2, 3, any order. In race 7, I got horse 1 to win, Melisandre, who I think I had last year. It's all coming back to me. And I accidentally did 2 horses. I did 2 separate bets of Shooting Money to win and Out on Saturday to win, but I may combine that into a $5 exacta box. Finish 1 and 2 in any order. So I think I'm gonna have to go cancel those and do that. But that's where I was on for today. So hopefully I have as good a day today as I did yesterday. We can grow that lead.
Yeah, pretty nice. Well, hey, listen, I don't mind doing it, but I need to get some winners too. Hoof-Hearted is not in tonight's races. We'll let you know. I guarantee you, if Hoof-Hearted ends up being on the card, he will get bet by yours truly. I can guarantee that, but I don't think that's happening. HPIBet.com if you want to bet on the track here in Winnipeg and the others around Canada. But listen, there's nothing better than getting out to Assiniboia Downs for live racing. They're going at it again tonight. No Wednesday racing tomorrow or next week. And then it'll be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday nights for the rest of the year. Post time is 7:30 p.m. This has been a real fun show coming back. Mike McIntyre is going to join us tomorrow. As I mentioned, we will talk Sea Bears, and I'm going to hook up with Winnipeg's Nigel Dawes, who just finished an incredible career, starting off as a World Junior hero in the early 2000s, playing over 200 games in the National Hockey League, and then 10 years overseas, including 7 in Kazakhstan. He's a real interesting guy. He's back in Winnipeg with his family now. We're going to talk about his incredible hockey journey tomorrow on the program. We'll also have Mike McIntyre, and get ready for Sea Bears season coming up on Saturday. That is going to do it for us today, folks. Thanks to all of our wonderful sponsors and all of you for making us a part of your day. Tell a friend about WST and make sure you've hit that red subscribe button. And if you haven't, if you're finding us on YouTube, get to your favorite podcast feed and search Winnipeg Sports Talk and subscribe there as well. Big thanks to Joe Pascucci. Great stuff from the Hockey Hall of Fame today, and an awesome conversation with Jeff Hamilton. That is going to do it for us. Have an awesome night. Enjoy the weather. Gold Eyes tonight. Assiniboia Downs tonight. Many options. But one thing that is not an option, it's mandatory, is that you join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. live on YouTube for another edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk. Have a great one, everyone.
Oh, my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.